Rin Akatsuki had protected Kogane Kingdom for 7 years, and the kingdom thanked him by dragging him through the capital with rotten vegetables in his hair and chains biting into his wrists. The people were not confused. That was the part he noticed first. They were relieved. The palace had given them a clean villain, and they accepted him with both hands because hatred was easier than remembering. A fishmonger who once bowed when Rin rode past the market threw a cracked bowl that split against his shoulder. A baker's wife whose eldest son had survived the western raid because Rin held a burning gate with half his armor melted, hurled a tomato so hard it burst across his chest. Children copied their parents because children always learned faster than adults admitted. A stone struck above Rin's brow and warm blood slid down one side of his face. He kept walking. The guards wanted him to stumble. The crowd wanted him to plead. The priests wanted shame. Rin gave them the one thing that bothered them more than anger. He looked tired. Not guilty, not broken, just tired like a man who had finally reached the end of a long road and found the people waiting there had sold the bridge behind him. The royal judgment road climbed toward the palace stairs, white stone polished by generations of noble sandals and public executions. At the top stood Princess Tama Sayonji, saintess of the Moon Temple and beloved daughter of the crown. She wore ceremonial white with gold thread prayers stitched along her sleeves and a veil thin enough to show the tear marks carefully painted beneath her eyes. Her hands trembled around a string of prayer beads. The trembling was good. Rin had to admit that. Perfectly measured. Too much would look theatrical. Too little would look cold. Behind Tama, the high priests lowered their heads as if innocence had a sound and they alone could hear it. Beside her stood Kei Toma, the kingdom's new hero, polished in silver armor fresh from the temple treasury. His sword, Rika, hung at his side with a sacred ribbon wrapped around the hilt. Rin recognized the blade. The balance was wrong near the guard. Pretty weapon. Bad for war. 3 rows behind the ministers, almost hidden by officials in black court robes, Shizu Hozuki held a stack of records against her chest. She was the palace's youngest senior archivist, a woman who treated dates like holy scripture and hated anyone who moved a document without signing the shelf log. Her expression stayed still, but her thumb worried the edge of one scroll until the paper bent. Rin saw it. Minister Nari Hoshino saw Rin seeing it. Nari's mouth lifted with the smallest possible smile. The accusation had been announced at sunrise. Princess Tama claimed Rin forced himself on her inside the West Prayer Hall after she summoned him for a private blessing before his retirement ceremony. The palace physician arrived with a report too quick to be honest. 2 maids testified with matching phrases. A temple relic glowed red in the courtroom, and the priests declared that sacred light did not lie, which was a useful thing to say when nobody was allowed to inspect the relic. By noon, Rin's medals were stripped. By mid-afternoon, the criers had already reached the market districts. By sunset, mothers were covering their children's eyes when the former shield hero passed, as if the man who had carried children out of demon fires had become dangerous to look at. 3 nights earlier, Tama had come to him in the moon garden. She came without guards, which was already a lie. Princesses like Tama were never truly alone. If no knight stood behind her, someone was watching from behind a screen under a roof beam or through the mouth of a servant trained to hear only useful things. She carried a silver cup of wine and smiled like a shrine painting. "You should not retire," she told him. "The kingdom still needs you." Rin kept a respectful distance from her sleeves. He had learned that lesson over 2 years. Tama liked stepping close enough for witnesses to misunderstand and far enough for servants to swear she had done nothing. "The kingdom has Lord Kei now," Rin said. Her smile stayed gentle. "Kei is blessed. You are trusted. Trust fades faster than blessing." Tama laughed at that. A soft laugh. Beautiful if someone heard only the sound and missed the teeth behind it. "You always speak as if you are already leaving me." Rin looked past her toward the pond where moonlight gathered on the water. "I was never yours, Your Highness." The garden went quiet. A frog croaked somewhere near the reeds. Even that sounded nervous. Tama lowered the wine cup. "I offered you a place no soldier in this kingdom could dream of. You offered me a leash covered in silk." For a moment her face showed the woman beneath the saintess. Young, furious, unused to hunger that did not get fed. Then the veil came down again. She stepped close enough that her incense touched his throat. "You think you understand me? I understand enough. Then say it properly." Rin should have lied. A better courtier would have bent the truth until it became flattery. He would have called himself unworthy, praised her holiness, begged forgiveness for his dull soldier's heart. He might have walked away with his life intact and his reputation only half poisoned. Rin had spent too many years at the demon border where pretty lies got men killed slowly, so he gave her the honest version. You do not want a husband. You want the old hero kneeling beside your throne before people start asking why he was replaced. If I love you, your power looks like destiny. If I refuse, it looks like ambition. Tama stared at him. Rin bowed because habits survived longer than faith. I'm tired, your highness. Let someone else decorate your future. She poured the wine into the pond. The red liquid spread through the moon's reflection and disappeared. You should have been easier, she said. Now standing before the capital in chains, Rin understood the shape of those words. Minister Nari stepped forward with the exile decree. He was narrow-faced, neat-fingered, and dry as old ink. His voice carried through the square without effort, the voice of a man who could ruin a family while sounding bored by procedure. Rin Akatsuki, former commander of the Dawn Guard, former bearer of the Shield Hero title, is stripped of rank, land honors, pension, temple protection, and royal favor. For the violation of sacred trust against Her Highness Princess Tama Sayonji, he is sentenced to exile beyond Higan Valley. His name will be removed from military prayers. His likeness will be covered in public halls. Any citizen who shelters him after this hour will be judged as aiding corruption. The crowd loved the last line. People always enjoyed justice more when it arrived with permission to punish someone else. An egg hit Rin's boot. A woman shouted that demons had always been inside him. A drunk man screamed for his hands to be cut off. Two nobles near the front covered their mouths behind fans, not from disgust, but because they were trying not to smile before the wrong eyes noticed. Rin searched the stairs one last time, not for kindness. He had stopped expecting that halfway down Judgment Road. He searched for hesitation. A captain who remembered the border. A priest who had seen him bleed in temple wards. A merchant who knew Rin had refused wartime bribes, any flicker of doubt large enough to prove the kingdom had not rotted all the way through. Shizu took half a step forward. Nari turned his head slightly. It was a small movement, almost polite, the sort of warning that never appears in official records. Shizu stopped. Rin's jaw shifted once. He stopped looking for a hand in the crowd. If truth had to beg this hard to be heard, then truth had no place in that square. Kei Toma descended the first few steps. The new hero's silver cloak caught the light beautifully. The temple had done well with the image, young, clean, blessed, controllable. He looked at Rin with the stiff anger of someone who needed the accusation to be true because his own rise felt cleaner that way. You were everything I wanted to become, Kei said. Rin glanced at Rika's ribbon-wrapped hilt. Then start by learning how to hold that sword before it breaks your thumb. Kei's face tightened. There was still a boy inside that armor, and Rin had just found him. You dare mock me today. I'm giving you free instruction. That is more mercy than I received. Kei stepped closer. You betrayed the princess. You betrayed the kingdom. Rin looked past Kei toward Tama. Did they tell you the prayer hall doors open inward? Kei faltered. It lasted half a breath, but Rin saw it. The West Prayer Hall had inward opening doors because winter wind once tore the old outer hinges off during a storm. If Tama had screamed and fought the way the maids claimed, the guards outside should have seen the door rattle. The official testimony said they heard her cry from across the hall and rushed in after finding the door barred. A small detail, a boring detail. Lies hated boring details. Nari cleared his throat before Kei could answer. The minister did not want curiosity near the crowd. The guards shoved Rin forward. The chain between his ankles had been shortened for public humiliation, so each step dragged the iron over stone. The people roared when he stumbled. The sound had a festival rhythm. That was almost funny. The capital loved celebrations, victory parades, saintess blessings, demon heads displayed at the gates. Today they celebrated throwing away the man who used to bring the heads. Rin passed the hero memorial near the South Arch. His own statue stood there with a cloth thrown over its face. Someone had painted Beast across the stone chest. At the statue's feet, old offerings remained because palace servants had not cleared them yet. Cracked spear charms, children's wooden swords, faded prayer boards from border families, and a rusted medal that belonged to a dead scout named Iori, if Rin remembered the chip on the edge correctly. He did remember. That was the problem with surviving wars. The dead became details nobody else kept. Rin looked at the covered statue and felt something inside him loosen from its old place. For 7 years he had believed protection was sacred even when the protected were ungrateful. That belief had kept him standing through winters when men ate frozen barley and slept beside burning corpses because the cold was worse than the smell. It had made every sacrifice tolerable. He had told himself a hero did not choose who deserved rescue. The capital corrected him with stones and rotten food. A hero was a public object. People prayed to it when afraid, decorated it when proud, and broke it when someone powerful needed blame. The exile cart waited outside the south gate. It was not a proper prison wagon, just an old timber cart with iron rings bolted into the floor. The Crown used carts like that for debtors, border criminals, failed petitioners, and people whose deaths needed distance. 3 prisoners were already inside. A gray-haired clerk sat with his knees drawn up, spectacles cracked across one lens. A one-eyed woman leaned against the cart wall, one arm bandaged badly, her expression too amused for someone headed toward Higan Valley. A hooded boy, maybe 13, kept rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had scraped skin raw. The boy stared at Rin. "You're the shield hero." The guard kicked the cart step. "He's filth. Use the right title." Rin sat down as they locked his chain to the floor. The boy swallowed. Rin rested his head against the wood and looked at the sky beyond the bars. "Titles are expensive today. Save your money." The one-eyed woman gave a low laugh. The capital gates closed behind them with a heavy wooden groan. The crowd followed for a while, throwing whatever remained in their baskets. Their anger thinned as the road lengthened. Hatred was lively in a market square. It became lazy under rain clouds and muddy hills. By evening, only the escort remained. 6 palace guards rode beside the cart. Their captain was Jenda, a square man with a military beard and court-soft hands. Rin had seen him in palace barracks drilling recruits with speeches borrowed from men who had actually fought. Jenda loved discipline. Most men who loved discipline that loudly meant obedience for other people. The road to Higan Valley ran through dead cedar woods and old battlefield shrines. In the capital, parents used Higan as a bedtime threat. Beyond the valley, the demon lands began in broken ridges and ash grass. Exiles sent there rarely came back, which allowed the court to call it mercy instead of execution. Rin knew Higan better than any court map. He had retreated through those woods during the Red Winter. He knew where water collected under black moss. He knew which shrine stones were hollow. He knew an abandoned fort hidden past the eastern ridge because 5 years ago he had stored barley oil tools and spare arrowheads there while waiting for reinforcements that arrived 9 days late. He never reported the cache. Back then it felt like a soldier's harmless secret. Tonight it felt like the only honest thing the kingdom had ever left him. The cart passed the official valley marker without stopping. The gray-haired clerk noticed immediately. "Captain!" Jenda kept riding. The clerk tried again, voice shrinking. "The exile road turns east here." The one-eyed woman clicked her tongue. "He knows." The boy's breathing changed. Rin looked down at his cuffs. Temple ceiling marks had been burned into the iron, and the binding spikes carried poison. His fingers had gone numb by noon. The court physician was either careful or guilty enough to be afraid. Rin could still move, but the motion came with a price. Good. Prices made choices honest. The left road descended toward Kurokiba Ravine. Fog gathered there year-round, thick enough to swallow men, horses, and inconvenient stories. When the cart reached the old bridge, Jenda lifted one hand. The driver stopped before being told twice. That meant the driver had known too. Jenda dismounted. "The Crown has reconsidered the transport," he said. The clerk began shaking so badly his chains rang against the floor. The boy whispered, "Are they allowed to do that?" The one-eyed woman leaned toward him. "Kid people with swords are allowed to do a lot until someone makes it difficult." Jenda opened the cart gate and stepped inside. His sword angled toward Rin's throat. Rin smelled mint on his breath. Palace officers chewed mint before dirty work. It let them pretend murder had manners. "You should have died at the border," Jenda said. Rin looked past him toward the bridge supports. "You should have brought men who inspect rope." Jenda's brow creased. Rin moved. The short ankle chain whipped up and caught Jenda's sword wrist. Rin slammed his shoulder into the cart wall exactly where damp had softened the timber around the floor ring. The wood cracked. Jenda's blade sliced into the post instead of Rin's neck. The one-eyed woman drove both bound elbows into Genda's knee, and the captain dropped with a grunt that lost all its authority on the way down. The guards rushed forward. Rin tore his left wrist sideways through the damaged cuff hinge. Skin ripped. Pain flashed up his arm bright and clean. He let it pass through him and took Genda's dagger. The first guard climbed into the cart and received the dagger through the leather gap above his thigh guard. He fell backward into another man. Rin took the key ring from his belt before he hit the floorboards. Then the old bridge gave way. Years earlier, during a retreat, Rin had half-cut the eastern support rope so demons could not follow his squad if they needed to collapse the crossing. The repair work had been lazy. Rin remembered because lazy repairs killed soldiers. Tonight, the rope failed under the weight of panicking horses. One side of the bridge dropped with a wooden crack. Two horses screamed and slammed into each other. A guard vanished into the fog. Another clung to the broken rail until Yura, the one-eyed woman, kicked his hand free with zero ceremony. Rin unlocked his ankles, then hers. "Name?" he asked. "Yura," she said, rubbing her wrists. "Scout, former, according to idiots. Can you fight? I can ruin balance and morale. Useful." He tossed her the dagger and stepped out of the cart. The remaining guards finally saw him without the frame the palace had built around him. Not a chained disgrace, not a trial story. A border commander standing on bad ground with their formation broken. One man dropped his sword before Rin reached him. Another ran. Jenda crawled backward through mud trying to reach his blade. Rin stepped on it and crouched. "Who ordered the ravine?" Rin asked. Jenda's lips pressed shut. Rin dragged the broken cuff chain across the captain's throat and leaned just enough for the metal to speak. "Try loyalty if you want. I have time now." Jenda looked toward his surviving men. They looked away. Discipline, Rin thought, was a beautiful thing until it asked for volunteers. Minister Hoshino Jenda said, "Private seal, body unrecovered preferred." Before the trial? Jenda hesitated. Rin did not move. Somehow that was worse. "Yes," Jenda said. "Before." The word landed harder than the stones in the capital. The clerk stopped trembling. The boy stared. Yura's grin thinned into something colder. Rin had already known the accusation was false. He had known Tama's smile, the staged witnesses, the careful timing. Hearing the order came before the trial changed the shape of the wound. The accusation had not caused his exile. It had dressed the purge in holy clothes. Rin took Jenda's signet ring order pouch and the folded command hidden under his chest plate. Then he looked at the surviving guards. "Run." They did not wait for a second offer. Jenda tried to rise after them. Rin struck him with the pommel. The captain dropped into the mud alive, bleeding from the scalp, and worth more as evidence than as a corpse. Yura watched the guards disappear between the cedars. "You let messengers live. Fear travels better when it still has legs." That was almost poetic. "I've had a long day." They stripped the escort of horses, food rope, weapons, and cloaks. The damaged cart would not survive the ravine road, so Rin freed the clerk and the boy beside the broken bridge. The clerk introduced himself as Sato, a revenue scribe accused of stealing temple grain after he found ledgers showing relief funds had gone missing. The boy's name was Toki. He had cut the purse of a noble priest and claimed the purse had been swinging in a disrespectful way. Yura liked him on the spot. Rin pointed east through the woods. "The fishing village beyond the shrine path takes runaways if they can work. Change your names before you reach it." Sato looked at the execution order in Rin's hand. "And you?" Rin turned toward the black ridge beyond the cedar line. "I know a place the capital forgot." Higan Fort crouched behind dead trees like a mistake nobody bothered correcting. Its gate hung crooked. One watchtower leaned into the hill. Vines crawled over stone cracks and old demon scorch marks stained the outer wall in dark streaks. From the road it looked abandoned. From a soldier's eye it looked ugly but usable. They reached it before dawn. Yura checked the perimeter without being asked. Toki threw up behind a wall, wiped his mouth, then pretended nobody saw. Sato found the dry well and nearly cried when Rin showed him the hidden pump lever under a stone carved with moss. The lower storehouse opened after Rin broke 2 rusted locks and kicked the third because patience had become a limited resource. Inside were barley sacks wrapped in wax cloth hardtack, 3 oil jars, salt-spare cloaks, bandage rolls, arrowheads, old border tools, and a crate of cracked shields, stamped with a military mark the crown had probably forgotten existed. 4 people, 2 horses, stolen supplies, a fort, with more gaps than defenses. Still, it was more than the kingdom meant to leave him. Rin washed his face in a stone basin. Tomato pulp, blood mud, and old ash clouded the water. When the surface settled, his reflection looked back with one swollen, brow-torn lips, and the temple brand burned into his collarbone where the court had marked him unclean. He touched the brand. Then he laughed once. Yura heard from the doorway and leaned against the frame. That laugh means either recovery or collapse. Rin wrung blood from the cloth in his hand. Those are close relatives. By midday, Higan Fort had jobs. Yura repaired the eastern lookout and cursed whoever built the ladder. Sato sorted Jenda's pouch with the reverence of a priest handling holy remains, except his holy remains were fraud wax seals and administrative murder. Toki cleaned weapons with intense concentration, as if usefulness might keep fear away. The execution command was brief. Remove former SHIELD hero before border transfer, body unrecovered preferred, if witnesses remain classify under demon contact. Sato read it 3 times, then set it down with both hands. This was written before your public sentence, he said. I mean formally. The wording uses title removal language before the court removed your title. Someone had the decree drafted in advance. Rin stared at the paper. Sato adjusted his cracked spectacles. Also, this seal was pressed over another seal. See the ridge? The wax was softened and re-stamped. Can you identify the first seal? With a lamp oil, a clean knife, and a table that does not wobble like it resents numbers. Rin looked at the cracked crate they were using as furniture. Sato sighed. Later then. A black crow landed on the broken window frame. It shook rain from its feathers and peered into the storehouse like an old official checking attendance. Toki whispered, "Bad omen." Rin watched the bird hop along the stone. Better than most witnesses I had today. At sunset, a message arrived through the drainage tunnel beneath the north wall. Only 3 people in the palace had known about that tunnel. Rin had used it during the Red Winter to evacuate wounded scouts after demons cut the main road. He had told the route to 1 logistics officer, 1 medic, and Shizu Hozuki, because Shizu had been the only archivist willing to mark casualty routes accurately instead of making the map look prettier for court review. The message came inside a hollow prayer doll wrapped in oil paper. Rin broke it open with a knife. Shizu's handwriting was narrow, neat, and angry in the way only controlled people could be angry. West Prayer Hall entry log altered after complaint. Original guard rotation removed. Physician report copied in 2 inks. Exile decree registered before formal complaint. Record room watched. I cannot move openly. Below the main text in smaller writing she had added, I should have stepped forward. I know that. Rin read the last line longer than he wanted. Yura stood across the room pretending badly not to study his face. Friend? She asked. Archivist. That means friend with less running. Depends on the archivist. He fed the message to the lamp flame. The paper curled inward, blackening at the edges before the words vanished. Rin had not forgiven Shizu. Her silence on the stairs still sat somewhere behind his ribs, but she had sent proof while surrounded by people who murdered with documents. That counted for something. Maybe not enough. Something. The prayer doll contained 1 more item, a tiny strip of red wax pressed flat. Sato leaned close. That's from the sealed complaint box. Rin looked at him. Saintess petitions go through a private complaint box before court registration, Sato said. If Shizu sent this, she thinks the complaint was inserted after the decree. Yura frowned. Explain in non-clerk. The court made the punishment first, Rin said, then found the crime to fit it. The old fort went quiet around that. Night settled cold. Higan wine moved through broken stones and made the walls murmur like men speaking under their breath. Rin took a lamp and descended into the sealed lower chamber beneath the old shrine room. He had found the chamber years ago but never opened it. Back then, he still believed forbidden places belonged to the Crown Temple or some other institution with cleaner robes and dirtier hands. War interrupted the report. Later, grief did. Eventually, the chamber became one more secret Rin carried because no one had asked the right question. The stone door responded to blood from his torn wrist. 1 drop fell into the carved groove. The old mechanism drank it, clicked twice, and opened with a grinding sound that disturbed dust thick enough to taste. Inside was a judgment hall. The room looked less like treasure and more like shame preserved underground. A black wooden desk stood at the far end. Cracked judge masks lined the wall. Chains hung from ceiling beams, not fresh, not ceremonial, just old enough to make a person wonder who had been brought there and why nobody wrote songs about them. On an iron stand rested a book bound in dark leather marked with a half-sun crest. Sato stayed outside the doorway. I dislike that object as a taxpayer and as a person. Yura tilted her head. It has the mood of a book that bites. Rin walked in anyway. The moment his fingers touched the cover, the brand on his collarbone burned, not like fire, like a verdict being carved deeper. He caught the edge of the stand and waited for the pain to finish making its point. The book opened. Ink crawled across the page in red-black strokes. Condemned name, Rin Akatsuki. Public judgment, false. Legal truth, buried. First chain, execution order. Required proof. Seal, origin, witness, contradiction, payment record, blood, oath. Below that, names appeared. Genda, Nari Hoshino, Palace Physician, Jomei, Maid Witnesses Kusa and Renka, Temple Examiner, Byron, Princess Tama Sayonji. Tama's name drank the most ink. Rin did not smile. He did not thank whatever ancient thing had answered him. He turned one page and found a blank sheet waiting hungry for more. The book was not a miracle. It did not hand him the kingdom on a plate or whisper every secret into his ear. It showed chains, names, missing proof, doors he still had to kick open himself. That made it useful. Rin closed the cover. Yura looked almost offended. You find a cursed court book under a death fort and close it after 2 pages. It confirmed the order of things. Which is? Rin pinned Genda's execution command to the wall with a knife. They picked the grave before they picked the lie. By morning, Rin had written the fort's rules on 3 boards and nailed them above the gate. Children are never targets. Servants live unless they choose the master's sword. Titles do not hide guilt. He stood with the brush for a while before adding the 4th evidence first. Mercy, if earned. Yura read the boards with a scout's skeptical eye. This is an oddly formal bandit fort. It isn't a bandit fort. Rebel fort? Rin tied his torn hero cloak around his shoulders, dark lining outward. The royal embroidery disappeared beneath mud and ash. A court. Sato looked up sharply. A court needs jurisdiction. Rin picked up the black book and tucked it under his arm. The capital gave me Higan. That is horrifyingly close to legal reasoning. Good. Nari will hate it. Their first target arrived before sunset. Lord Kanza Mibu controlled the southern tax road, which meant he controlled grain movement, temple fees, exile transfers, and the price of mercy for anyone poor enough to need official paperwork. Kanza heard Rin survived the ravine and sent 12 estate riders into Higan with orders to capture him alive. The public reward had not even been posted yet. Kanza was simply early to the feeding trough. Sato found Kanza's name in Genda's pouch, then in the black ledger's margins, stolen death payments, forged widow relocation forms, soldier compensation moved through temple donation accounts. During the Red Winter, while Rin held the border with men sleeping in armor because demon horns sounded every night, Kanza had sold medicine meant for wounded scouts and listed 3 dead units as pending verification for half a year. Rin remembered one of those units, 17 men under Captain Yori, 9 bodies recovered, 4 burned beyond identification. 2 widows came to the supply office with babies wrapped in old cloak cloth. The clerk cried when he turned them away because the compensation seal had not arrived. Kanza had eaten well that winter. Rin listened to Sato read the figures and felt the last soft part of the day leave him. We have 4 fighters if we count, Tokiyura said. Toki looked up. I count. You count as noise with ambition. I can be useful noise. Rin studied the old valley map spread across a crate. Kanza's men don't know Higan. They'll follow tracks if we give them tracks. Yura leaned over the map. Marsh path? Too obvious. You wound me. Shrine bend. Narrow ground. Horses hate the bells there. Toki raised a hand. I can hang bells. Yura pointed at him. Useful noise. Sato swallowed. And me? Rin slid a small knife across the crate. You cut saddle straps on the rear horses. I am a revenue scribe. You found missing temple grain. With ink. Tonight you meet leather. Sato looked at the knife like it had asked him to marry into a violent family. Kanza's riders entered the valley at dusk. Yura left false boot tracks along the cedar slope, then doubled back through a drainage ditch. Toki hung old border bells from low branches, the kind used in wartime to warn scouts of movement. Sato crawled beneath the broken bridge and cut just enough leather to turn panic into injury later. He complained the whole time in whispers, which Rin allowed, because fear with moving hands was still useful. Rin waited beneath the cracked torii at Shrine Bend. The riders came in loud. Rich men's guards often rode loud. It reminded poor people to move aside before they had names to complain with. The lead rider saw Rin and grinned with more teeth than confidence. Rin Akatsuki, Lord Mibu requests your surrender. Rin looked at the 12 riders, the narrow trail, the marsh edge, the bells hidden in cedar branches. Requests? The rider shrugged. Alive pays better. Honest answer. I'm not paid for philosophy. No. Just dying in bad terrain. The rider's grin slipped. Then the bells rang. Horses spooked sideways. The rear saddles loosened. 2 men hit the mud before drawing steel. Yura came out of the ditch and broke one guard's wrist with a staff strike that sounded expensive. Toki yanked a rope tied to a branch, dumping old ash over 3 riders and blinding them long enough for Rin to close the distance. Rin did not fight like a tournament hero. He fought like a man who had spent years surviving ugly places. He cut reins. He struck throats with sword hilts. He kicked knees sideways. He used fallen horses as barriers and low branches as traps. When his poisoned wrist failed for half a second, he switched hands without drama and drove the pommel into a guard's jaw. The fight ended fast because it had been decided before the riders arrived. The last rider crawled away through mud with his helmet half over his face. Rin stood over him. Tell Kanza I'm coming for the accounts. The rider nodded hard enough to splash mud on his own chin. Yura watched him run. You could have said his head. Men like Kanza fear ledgers more. Dark. Clerk-friendly, but dark. Lord Kanza fortified his manor by midnight. By then Rin was already inside. Kanza's estate sat beside the southern road built from polished cedar and tax arrogance. The walls were high in the places visitors could see and weak in the servant quarter because nobles trusted social rank more than locks. Rin entered through the ash passage behind the kitchens with Yura at his back. Sato guided them using the tax layout he had memorized with visible resentment. Toki stayed with the horses and called the job unfair until Yura threatened to promote him to bait. The accounts office smelled of cedar oil, old ink, and stolen winter. Kanza had written everything down. Corrupt officials loved records. They believed paper protected them because common people could not read it, servants could not challenge it, and judges could be bought before anyone unfolded the scroll. Rin opened drawer after drawer and found widow payment diversions, forced debt contracts, exile transfer fees, temple kickbacks, and 3 letters bearing Minister Nari's private mark. One letter carried a sentence that made Rin's hand stop. Akatsuki remains beloved among border remnants. Replacement ceremony must precede retirement unrest. Rin read it twice, so even his retirement had been scheduled like a disposal. A sliding door opened behind him. Lord Kanza Mibu stood in a night robe with a short sword gripped in both hands. He was broad in the stomach, narrow in courage, and sweating so hard his forehead shone in the lamplight. You dare enter my house? Rin set the letter down. You entered my war first. This land is under royal authority. So were the graves you robbed. Kanza's eyes flicked toward the open ledgers. There it was, the fear beneath the outrage. Men like Kanza did not think death would find them in their own houses. But records? Records could travel. Whatever you believe you found means nothing, Kanza said. You are condemned. Your word has no standing in any court. Rin looked around the office. All these records and you still think court is a room. Yura appeared behind Kanza and swept his legs. He hit the floor with a sound that ruined any chance of dignity. Rin ordered the household gathered in the courtyard. Guards who resisted were disarmed and bound. Servants were brought out unharmed. Kitchen girls, grooms, laundry women, an old housekeeper with shoulders bent from decades of invisible work, 2 stable boys, 3 debt-bound maids, and a thin man who looked like he had apologized to doors before opening them. Lanterns were lit. The manor records were carried into the yard. Rin stood in front of Kanza's household with his black cloak moving in the night wind. Who here signed debt under threat? At first, nobody moved. Fear did not vanish because a new dangerous man asked a cleaner question. Then the old housekeeper raised one hand. A groom followed, one maid, then another. A stable boy lifted his hand while staring at the ground like the ground might punish him for honesty. Kanza shouted that they were thieves. Rin let him shout because the servants needed to hear how small he sounded without guards standing between his words and their lives. Sato began reading from the ledgers: names, amounts, false charges, widow pay stolen and filed as temple donation, grain relief sold to merchants during famine, exile fees taken from families to soften sentences that were never softened, compensation for dead border soldiers redirected into Kanza's private storehouse. The courtyard changed slowly. Nobody cheered. Real people rarely cheered when their prison door opened. They checked first whether another prison waited outside. Some servants looked relieved. Some looked sick. The old housekeeper stared at Kanza with a quiet hatred that had probably been sitting inside her long enough to grow roots. Rin ordered the grain stores opened before dawn. By sunrise, farmers from 3 road villages were standing outside the estate gate reading copies of the ledgers nailed to the wood. Kanza was bound beneath his own family crest, alive, shaking, forced to listen as Sato read the names of people he had robbed. Rin had made sure of that. Dead men could be polished by priests. Living men sweating beneath their own handwriting were much harder to bless. Kanza tried money first, then apology, then blame. By the time he claimed the temple made him do it, even his own guards would not meet his eyes. The old housekeeper approached Rin with the estate keys in both hands. "What happens to us?" Rin looked at the open grain stores, the freed servants, the farmers, the bound guards, and Kanza, shivering beneath the crest he had used to frighten half the road. "You divide what he stole. Keep records in 2 copies. One stays here, one goes to Higan. And Lord Mibu?" Rin looked at Kanza. A younger Rin would have taken him to the capital. A younger Rin would have believed enough proof could force a clean verdict from dirty hands. That younger man had walked Judgment Road yesterday and been pelted with vegetables by people who liked justice most when it was already decided. "Kanza Mibu stole from the dead and charged the living for grief," Rin said. "He helped pay for the court that framed me. His title protected him long enough." Kanza began begging. Rin drew his sword. The scene stayed quiet. One clean motion. A rope pulled tight beneath the estate arch. Kanza's body hung under his own gate with copies of his crimes pinned on boards around him. The black half-sun crest marked each page in ink. There was blood, but not enough to turn the moment into spectacle. The message mattered more than the body. By noon, travelers had seen it. By evening, the southern tax road had a new story. Rin Akatsuki lived. Lord Kanza Mibu did not. The stolen grain had been returned. The servants had walked out carrying keys. The evidence was still there for anyone brave enough to read it. At the bottom of the largest board, Rin had written one sentence: "Titles do not hide guilt." In the capital, Minister Nari Hoshino received the report during breakfast. He did not shout. He did not spill tea. Nari had spent decades teaching his face to behave in front of servants. He placed the report beside his bowl and asked, "Who else has read this?" The messenger bowed low. 3 courier stations, 2 temple outposts, the southern toll office, and the road villages near Mibu Estate. Nari folded the paper once, then again. Rumors were worse than soldiers. Soldiers needed pay. Rumors worked for attention. At the Moon Temple, Princess Tama knelt before the goddess statue while incense drifted around her like stage fog. Her ladies waited behind screens. When the chief maid whispered Kanza's name, Tama's prayer beads stopped for one breath. Then they continued. "Lord Mibu was greedy," she said softly. "The people will accept that one criminal murdered another. And Rin Akatsuki." Tama opened her eyes. In public, she would tremble. She would ask the goddess to protect the kingdom from a fallen hero corrupted by demon lands. She would let priests describe his evidence as cursed forgery. She would mourn Kanza just enough to look merciful and distance herself just enough to look pure. It was an easy performance. The kingdom had trained itself to applaud her sadness. In private, she remembered Rin smiling at her from the palace stairs with blood on his face. "He wants to stain the court," she said. The chief maid lowered her gaze. Tama's voice stayed gentle. "Then give the people something darker to fear." By nightfall, temple criers entered the lower districts with fresh proclamations. Rin Akatsuki had murdered a noble lord using demon arts. Anyone spreading his documents would lose temple burial rights. Anyone carrying the black half-sun mark would be treated as infected by border corruption. Palace officers were authorized to seize suspicious papers without warning. The proclamation worked beautifully in the noble quarter. It worked less beautifully near the southern road where families were eating Kansas stolen grain. At Higan Fort, Rin stood on the broken watchtower and listened to distant temple bells rolling faintly across the valley. The black ledger lay open on the stone beside him. New ink gathered across the page slower than before, like it was tasting the shape of what he had done. Southern Tax Road, frightened, unstable watching. Public claim, demon corruption. Next chain, saintess charity fund. Connected names, Kanza Mibu Nari Hoshino Tama Sayonji Temple Examiner Beiren. Hidden witness. Alive. Rin's finger stopped on the last line. Yura leaned over his shoulder, then leaned back because even she had limits with cursed objects. Hidden witness sounds useful. Sato came up the stairs carrying a lamp, or bait, usually both, Yura said. The ink shifted again. Renka, one of Tama's maids, one of the two women who testified that Rin forced the prayer hall door shut while the saintess cried for help. Below her name, the ledger formed a location, Moonwell Convent, under temple guard, transfer at dawn. Sato's face changed. That convent is close to the capital. Rin closed the ledger. Toki, sitting on a crate with half an apple, looked between them. So we're attacking a convent? Yura gave him a look. What? I'm asking for planning reasons. Rin looked south where the capital bells were still trying to teach the kingdom which lies were safe to repeat. We're attacking the road. Sato swallowed. Temple convoy? Quiet transfer, Rin said. Nari wants her moved before Shizu finds the original testimony. Tama wants the temple to own her mouth before she uses it. Yura rolled her shoulder. And you want the mouth. I want what she was paid to say. The fort stirred below them. Yura checked blades. Sato packed ink wax and stolen ledgers with the offended precision of a man going to war against bad filing. Toki tightened saddle straps and pretended he had not been practicing with a knife behind the storehouse. Rin stopped at the gate before leaving. 4 boards hung there now rough under torchlight. Children are never targets. Servants live unless they choose the master's sword. Titles do not hide guilt. Evidence first. Mercy, if earned. He took a brush and added a 5th line. The court may answer in blood or truth. I accept either. Yura read it and snorted. That one feels less polite. I'm improving. Rin tied the broken royal medal to his belt. The metal clinked once against his sword. The sound was small, almost pathetic, but it reminded him of the capitol stairs, the covered statue, Tama's careful tears, Kei's polished armor, Shizu's bent scroll, and the crowd looking relieved as they threw stones. They had already named him a monster. Rin did not need to correct them tonight. He just needed to make the name expensive. Before dawn, the temple convoy entered the old pilgrim road with 6 guards, 2 priests, 1 covered carriage, and a prisoner inside who had helped bury the truth. The fog was waiting between the cedar trees. So were the black crows. The temple convoy reached the old pilgrim road before sunrise, and the first thing the guards noticed was that the fog had swallowed the shrine bells. That road was supposed to be safe. Pilgrims used it during spring rites. Temple wagons carried candles, rice sacks, and sick children through it whenever the Moon Church wanted the kingdom to remember how generous it looked in public. But this early, with the cedar trees bent over the stones and the mist hiding the horses' legs, even holy ground felt like it was holding its breath. Inside the covered carriage, Renka coughed once and tried to muffle it. Rin Akatsuki stood above the road on the cracked roof of a wayside shrine, his black cloak pulled tight against the damp. Below him, 6 temple guards moved in a loose formation around the carriage. 2 priests rode in front, one young and nervous, the other older and harder to read. The older one was Saimon, a temple handler whose name had appeared in the black ledger beside witness transfers, charity wards, and 3 sealed orders marked with saintess authority. Rin watched Saimon's hands. People lied with their mouths. Their hands usually told the truth sooner. Saimon's right hand never left the prayer cord tied around his wrist. That cord matched the knot around Renka's wrists in the transport report, so the maid was not simply being moved, she was being carried like a locked document. Yura waited on the left side of the road, hidden in the black cedar branches, with a short spear across her knees. Sato crouched under the old offering platform, clutching a knife he clearly hated and an ink pouch he loved far more. Toki hid behind a shrine stone with 2 rope loops, counting the horses under his breath, like numbers could stop him from being scared. Rin had given them a simple order before leaving Higan Fort. Take the witness alive. Take the records if possible. Spare the confused. Break the ones who know too much and still choose the lie. Toki had asked how they would tell the difference. Rin's answer had been short. Watch who protects the papers. Now the convoy rolled deeper into the bend. One horse snorted and stopped. The young priest cursed under his breath, then looked embarrassed for cursing while dressed in temple white. Saman did not even turn his head. Move, he said. Senior Saman the Fog. The witness reaches Moonwell Convent before morning prayer. If fog frightens you, request candle duty when we return. That was enough. Temple men feared shame almost as much as death. The convoy moved again. Toki pulled the first rope. Old border bells rang from 3 directions at once. The sound was small, almost delicate, but every guard on that road reacted. Horses jerked sideways. One rider twisted too sharply and slammed his knee into the carriage wheel. Another reached for his sword while staring at the wrong tree. The formation cracked in exactly the places Rin had expected. Yura dropped first. She landed behind the rear guard, hooked one arm around his neck, and used his weight to drag him off the saddle. By the time the second guard turned, she had already taken the fallen man's spear. Rin came down from the shrine roof a breath later. His blade cut the lead horse's reins, and the animal bolted toward the ditch, dragging the front line apart without a single wound on the horse. Saman reacted quickly. Demon ambush, he shouted. Protect the carriage! Wrong word, right instinct. He understood the witness mattered more than the guards. 2 men rushed the carriage door. Rin reached them first. He struck one in the throat with the sword hilt, turned his shoulder into the second man's chest, and drove him into the wheel hard enough to crack the outer frame. In the same moment, Sato crawled from under the offering platform and cut the strap, holding Saman's travel chest to the pack horse. The chest hit the stones, burst open, and spilled scrolls, coin strings, folded talismans, and sealed receipts into the mud. Sato stared at the scattered documents. His fear did not vanish. It simply became offended. They filed this under charity transport, he muttered. A guard lunged at him. Sato ducked so clumsily he nearly fell into the man's boots. Toki's rope caught the guard's ankle and pulled. The man dropped face first into the road. Toki stared at his own hands afterward, surprised the trick had worked outside practice. Yura shouted from the rear, "Stay useful, kid." Toki looked proud for half a second, then remembered people were still trying to kill them, and ducked behind the shrine stone again. Rin reached the carriage. The door was locked from the outside with a temple seal pressed into red wax. He broke the seal with his pommel and pulled the door open. Renka sat inside with prayer cord wrapped around her wrists and a cloth charm over her mouth. Her face was pale, her hair half loose, and her eyes went wide when she saw him. That reaction told Rin more than any confession could. She was afraid of him, yes, but she was more afraid of what would happen if she spoke. Rin cut the gag free. Renka drew in one shaking breath and tried to say something. The prayer cord tightened around her wrists. A red mark flashed beneath the skin at her throat, and her voice broke before it became a word. She gagged, bent forward, and grabbed the edge of the seat like she was being strangled from inside. On the road, Saman rose from the mud with Yura's spear pointed at his chest. His cheek was cut, but his composure remained annoyingly intact. She cannot speak against sacred testimony, he said. Her words belong to the temple until purification is complete. Rin stepped down from the carriage. Saman lifted his chin. Kill me, and the church will tell every village that feeds you they are feeding demon corruption. Rin looked at Renka's throat again. The seal pulsed beneath her skin, thin and red, tied to the cord around Saman's wrist. Then he asked, "Where is her family?" The priest's silence came too quickly. Renka gripped the carriage frame with both hands. Her eyes filled, but she made no sound. The answer was there. Saman knew it. Rin knew it. Even Toki, still half hidden behind the shrine stone, understood enough to stop breathing loudly. Sato dragged Saman's travel chest closer and began sorting through the receipts in the mud. His fingers moved with professional speed now. Fear had made him shake during the ambush. Paper steadied him. Dependent transfer, Sato said. Moonwell Convent. One minor male Kyo attached to palace maid Renka, marked under protective charity custody. Renka closed her eyes. Seimon's expression hardened. The temple protects vulnerable families. Yura looked down at the chest, then at the priest. You people make kidnapping sound exhausting. Rin opened the black ledger. The book had been quiet under his cloak until then, but the moment its cover parted, the air near the carriage seemed to grow colder. Ink formed across the page. Witness bound by oath seal, seal holder, Seimon, release condition, holder confession or holder death. Sato read over Rin's shoulder and swallowed. Confession would be better, usually, Rin said. He cut Seimon's palm and pressed the bleeding hand against the page. Admit you sealed her testimony to keep her from changing it. Seimon stared back at him. There was fear in him now, but it had not reached his pride yet. I admit nothing to a condemned beast. The seal on Renka's throat tightened. She choked fingers, clawing at the carriage seat. Rin's face did not change, but Yura saw his grip shift on the sword. Seimon saw it too. He tried one last shield. Every corpse you leave proves the saintess right. You think this is justice, but the capital will only see a criminal killing priests. Rin leaned close enough that Seimon stopped breathing through his nose. Then give them a living reason to doubt you. For a moment the priest almost considered it. Almost. His eyes moved toward the travel chest, toward the guards watching from the road toward the carriage where Renka was coughing blood into her sleeve. He measured survival against loyalty and chose the institution that had taught him he mattered. The saintess is purity given flesh, Seimon said. Rin killed him cleanly. The seal on Renka's throat cracked like dry lacquer. She collapsed sideways in the carriage, coughing hard enough that Yura had to catch her by the shoulders. The remaining guards lowered their weapons one by one. Two looked confused, the kind of confused men get when they were told they were escorting a dangerous liar and instead watched a priest silence a witness. One guard looked guilty. His eyes kept returning to the travel chest. Rin noticed. Bind him, he said. Yura handled it without asking which one. Sato gathered the papers from the mud with the kind of care other men gave wounded comrades. Rin did not mock him for it. In this war, Sato was saving survivors too. They just happened to be written in ink. Renka found her voice after several minutes. I saw nothing. The words came out raw, barely above a whisper, but everyone heard them. Rin looked at her. In the West Prayer Hall, she said, forcing herself to continue, I saw nothing happen. Her Highness's sleeve was torn before we entered. The physician told us where to stand. Kusa and I were given lines, same words, same order. They said if our phrasing differed, our families would be moved from charity custody to the silent ward. Toki looked from Renka to Seimon's body. What's the silent ward? Nobody answered him. That was answer enough. Yura asked, Where is Kusa now? Renka's mouth trembled. Dead. Fever, they said, the night after testimony. The road felt colder after that. Kusa had been the second maid, the other matching witness. The court had already removed one loose thread before Rin could touch it. Renka kept speaking faster now, as if the words might kill her if they stayed inside. The complaint was written before I entered the hall. Princess Tama told the physician the old hero had finally made himself useful. I thought she meant you would be exiled and kept away from court. I didn't know they planned to kill you on the road. Rin watched her struggle through the confession. There was a part of him that wanted to hate her simply. It would have been easy. She had stood in court and helped turn him into an animal for the crowd. Her fear did not clean that. Her brother's captivity did not erase the stones, but the kingdom had been built to put weak people between powerful people and consequences. If Rin started killing every frightened servant used as a shield, he would end up doing the noble's work for them, so he asked the question that mattered most. Where is the payment record? Renka blinked. She had expected rage, maybe a blade, maybe an accusation she could cry under. Rin gave her paperwork, the saintess charity fund, she said. The servant coercion records are hidden inside it. Moonwell holds the dependents. Tsurumi Hall stores the donation ledgers. Temple examiner Baron signs the transfers. The black ledger warmed in Rin's hand. Payment record, Tsurumi Hall. Blood oath, temple examiner Byron. Witness contradiction, Renka secured. Rin closed the book. Yura looked at the road toward the capital. Brother first or records first? Both. Sato exhaled through his teeth. That word is how disasters introduce themselves. Rin handed him Seimon's travel receipts, then give the disaster a route. Sato looked at the wet papers at the bound guard at Renka trembling in the carriage and accepted the work because he was already angry enough to forget he was afraid. Rin left Seimon beneath the cracked pilgrim bell. He tied the transport receipts beside the body, marked the largest page with the black half-sun, and ordered the 2 spared guards to carry the story back. Seimon had silenced a witness. Rin had taken her alive. The road would know before the temple could polish the details. One of the spared guards asked what would happen if the message changed before reaching the capital. Yura smiled at him. The guard decided accuracy was a religious duty after all. The return to Higan Fort took most of the day. Renka could barely sit upright, so Toki gave her water and pretended not to notice when her hands shook around the cup. He was angry at her. Rin could see it, but anger did not stop the boy from seeing a person in pain. That was either his weakness or the last decent thing the world had not taken from him yet. Yura rode behind the group, watching the trees. Sato kept Seimon's chest tied to his saddle and muttered over damaged receipts like a doctor complaining about infected wounds. Rin walked for part of the road. His torn wrist had reopened during the fight, and the temple brand at his collarbone burned whenever the ledger shifted under his cloak. The pain was useful. It kept him from thinking too softly. At Higan Fort, Renka's arrival changed the air. The freed servants from Kanza's estate had reached the fort while Rin was gone, bringing grain, 2 wagons, 3 carpenters, 4 goats, and relatives who did not yet know whether Higan was rescue rebellion or a different shape of danger. They had heard Rin killed Lord Kanza. They had also eaten from the grain Kanza stole. Gratitude and fear sat together in the courtyard, both watching the gate. When Renka stepped inside, whispers moved through the fort. That's one of the maids. She testified. She helped the princess. Why is she walking? Renka lowered her head and waited. Maybe she expected the crowd to fall on her. Maybe she thought punishment would make things clean. People who did harm under pressure often wanted a blade more than a long debt. A blade ended the conversation. Debt forced them to stay useful. Rin stopped in the courtyard and pointed to the rule board above the gate. Read the second line. Renka turned slowly. Servants live unless they choose the master's sword. Her lips moved over the words, but no sound came out. Rin faced the people gathered there. She lied in court. She will answer for it. She will also testify, identify records, and help us find the people still being held through those lies. A former groom from Kanza's estate stepped forward, anger sharp in his face. And if she runs, she won't. That was not trust. Nobody mistook it for trust. The groom pushed further. Why does she get a chance? Rin looked at him for a long moment. Because fear is the weapon they use on servants. If I punish everyone they point that weapon at, I become their cleanup man. The groom did not like the answer. Several people did not. Rin preferred that. A rule that comforted everyone was usually hiding something. Isa, the old housekeeper from Kanza's manor, stepped forward. She had taken charge of food distribution within an hour of arriving, and nobody had been foolish enough to challenge her. Where do you want her? Lower room. Watched. Fed. Nobody touches her. Issei nodded. Then she works for her rice. Renka flinched at the word works, then steadied herself. Good, Rin thought. Let her learn the difference between punishment and use. By night, Higan Fort no longer sounded abandoned. Carpenters patched the gate with salvaged planks. Yura marked watchposts and tested every person who claimed they could hold a spear. Issei turned the old barracks into sleeping quarters for dependents and workers. Toki carried water nails, rope, and messages until he looked ready to collapse out of stubbornness. Sato claimed the least ruined chamber as a records office and divided documents into stacks with labels only he understood. Rin passed the doorway and heard Toki ask, "Can I be in charge of something?" Sato did not look up. You are in charge of keeping candle wax away from evidence. That sounds tiny. Most disasters begin with someone disrespecting tiny things. Toki considered that as if it might be wisdom, then decided it was probably clerk nonsense and carried the candles anyway. The black ledger opened by itself on Sato's table. The room quieted fast. Ink spread across the page in thin branching lines. Southern Tax Road, Moonwell Convent, Tsurumi Hall, names formed in clusters beside coin marks, witness seals, and saintess charity stamps. The map looked less like a list of crimes and more like veins under skin. Sato leaned over it despite himself. The deeper picture came together in pieces. The Saintess Charity Fund was not only a public mercy project, it was a leash network: servants with sick siblings, widows waiting on pensions, orphans placed in temple dormitories, wounded soldiers' families, debtors who needed court signatures. People gave copper to the Saintess Fund, believing they were feeding the weak. The temple used that money to hold the weak close enough to control anyone who loved them. Sato read until his voice lost its color. They made grief profitable. Yura stood against the wall with her arms crossed. She had jokes for almost everything. This time, she kept them. Renka sat beside the lower doorway, Kyo's name written on a scrap of paper in her lap. Her fingers rested on it like touching the paper could keep him alive. Rin studied the map. The simple option was to burn Tsurumi Hall. It would feel good. People would cheer in the right places. The image would spread fast. The fallen hero setting fire to the Saintess Charity House. Tama would use that image until the end of the year. She would stand in white robes before the ruins and mourn kidnapped children, destroyed medicine, burned donations, corrupted mercy. The rich districts would believe her because they liked charity better when it came with distance. The poor would be too afraid to argue. The records would be ash, and Rin would own the fire while Tama buried the chain, so he would not burn it. "We take the ledgers," Rin said. "We take the dependents. We take the money tied to witness control. The building stays standing long enough for people to read what it was used for." Sato looked relieved by the respect shown to documents, then immediately worried about every other part. "Tsurumi Hall will have guards." Good. That was not an objection hoping for approval. Yura finally spoke. "Baron?" Rin's finger stopped on the examiner's name. "He gets heard in public." Sato stared at him. "You want to hold a hearing?" Rin glanced around the room. Cracked walls, stolen records, rescued servants, a cursed book rain dripping into a bucket near the door. "We have a court." Sato rubbed both eyes with ink-stained fingers. "We have ambition and a roof problem. Fix the roof." No one laughed loudly, but the room breathed a little easier. Sometimes that was all humor needed to do. The plan took 2 days, and those 2 days mattered more than the fight. Revenge had a boring spine. Wagons, food, rope, spare cloaks, fake passes, dry paper, clean knives, people who knew when to run and when to wait. Higan did not have the luxury of heroic chaos. Every rescued dependent would need a blanket, every seized ledger needed a copy, every surviving guard might become a witness or a problem. Rin had 4 reliable fighters if he counted himself one clerk with a dangerous relationship to accuracy, a boy who wanted trust more than safety, and a fort filled with people who had reasons to hate the kingdom but very little training. So Rin built the strike around what they could actually do. Renka drew Tsurumi Hall from memory: servant entrance, laundry court, public prayer, garden, donor office, charity, dormitory, lower ward, shrine vault. She marked where children slept and where kitchen girls washed bowls until their hands cracked in winter. When she marked Kyo's ward, the charcoal tip broke. Rin took another piece and handed it to her without comment. "What if he's been moved?" she asked. "Then we find who signed the movement order. What if he's dead?" The room became still. Rin did not give her an easy promise. He had heard too many easy promises from kings. Then the person who used him answers twice. Renka stared at the map until her eyes lowered. Later on the wall walk, Yura found Rin watching the southern road. "You moved the boy's ward to the center of the plain," she said. "He is leverage against a witness. Remove leverage, stabilize the witness." Yura gave him a flat look. "You know, if you keep explaining mercy like accounting, Sato may adopt you." Rin looked out over the valley. "I am not doing this to be kind. Maybe. But you keep choosing targets that deserve it, sparing people who were cornered and feeding children before counting coins. For a villain, you are developing annoying habits." Rin did not answer. Yura leaned her elbows on the broken wall. "I am not saying stay soft. Soft gets people killed. I am saying if you pretend there is nothing left in you but revenge, the people following you will eventually believe it. Then they will act like it." That landed closer than Rin liked. Below them, Toki was trying to lift a water bucket too large for him while pretending it was easy. Issei watched for exactly 3 seconds before taking one handle and making him take the other. Across the yard, Renka sat outside the lower room with her hands folded tightly, listening to rescued servants decide whether to hate her in whispers. Rin had wanted to become expensive to the kingdom. He had not thought enough about what kind of people would pay the price beside him. At the Capital Temple Examiner, Baron received Saemon's death report inside Surumi Hall. Baron was not a trembling fool. He was thin, precise, and unpleasantly calm. He read the report twice, then asked for the convoy inventory, the witness roster, and the names of every guard who returned alive. His assistant waited for the usual temple speech about demon corruption. Baron gave him logistics instead. Move the donation ledgers. The assistant blinked. Senior examiner? Rin Akatsuki is targeting proof before symbols. Men drunk on revenge burn banners. Commanders seize records. That was the first enemy who read Rin correctly. Baron ordered the charity dependents counted the lower ward, locked the real ledgers, moved from the donor office to the shrine vault, and a false archive prepared with clean fraud, the kind obvious enough to satisfy an intruder in a hurry. Then he requested royal soldiers from Minister Nari and prepared a purity relic for public use. He was smart. Rin expected smart eventually. Sato expected fake records immediately and took it personally before seeing them. They reached Surumi Hall on the third night under rain. The compound stood near the capital's outer charity district, white-walled and lantern-lit with moon symbols painted over the gates. It was beautiful in the controlled way institutions like to be beautiful, clean where donors walked quiet, where children slept, guarded where accounts were kept. Families waited outside the front gate, even at night, hoping to be early for morning bread tickets. Temple guards ignored them with practiced eyes. Rin studied the place from a nearby roof. He understood why Tama loved it. Cruelty looked better after someone washed the floor. Rin entered through the laundry court in a temple worker's cloak. Yura slipped over the rear wall with two former estate guards who had joined Higan after Kanza's fall. Sato came through the records entrance as an assistant courier, wearing borrowed spectacles and a sour expression that made him look official. Renka used the servant door with a basket in her arms and her head lowered. Toki stayed outside with Issa and the wagons. He had argued. Rin had given him the job that stopped the argument. When the lower ward opens, you get the children out. Toki had gone very quiet after that. For once, someone handed him a task that sounded like trust instead of pity. Inside Surumi Hall, incense covered the smell of damp bedding and old fear. Rin and Renka passed temple sisters carrying folded blankets, then a boy sweeping the corridor with a broom taller than his shoulder. Renka looked once, realized it was not Kyo, and kept walking. They reached the marked archive door. The guard outside yawned. Rin stopped. "What?" Renka whispered. "He is bored." "That's bad?" Men guarding real records sweat. Sato appeared from the side corridor, saw the guard, and looked deeply insulted. False archive. They changed routes. Renka led them through the offering hall where noble donation plaques lined the walls. Each plaque praised compassion in expensive calligraphy. Rin noticed scratches along the floor beneath them, half hidden by rugs. Heavy boxes had been dragged through that room often. Yura met them near the shrine passage. "Two guards by the vault," she whispered. "One alert, one decorative." Rin looked at Renka. She nodded. "When royal auditors come, Baron hides sealed records in the shrine vault." They moved fast. The alert guard went down with Yura's staff across the back of his knee and a hand over his mouth. The decorative guard turned out to be more decorative than guard. Rin unlocked the vault with a key taken from Baron's assistant earlier by one of Ice's former maids, who had apparently discovered a talent for lifting keys from holy pockets. The shrine vault smelled of lacquer, old coins, and closed air. Donation boxes sat in neat rows. Relic cases lined the shelves. Scroll cabinets covered the back wall. 3 white leather ledgers rested behind an inner screen. Sato approached them like a starving man approaching bread he suspected was poisoned. The first ledger listed noble donations. The second listed public expenses. The third had no title. Rin opened it. There they were. Names, dependents, relatives, debt purchases, witness preparation fees, silence payments, relocation threats, purity affirmations, Renka, Kyo, Kusa's aunt marked deceased, a border widow used in a rebel captain's trial, a groom who testified that a duke had been elsewhere during a murder, a temple novice transferred after changing his statement. Sato's anger became very quiet. "This is years of cases," he said. Rin turned another page. More than years. The black ledger warmed beneath his cloak. When he opened it, ink spread across a fresh page. Tsurumi chain confirmed. Saintess charity fund. Coercion network. Blood oath required. Baron. Hidden mechanism. Purity. Relic. Before Rin could close the book, a bell rang inside the compound. One bell. Sharp. Repeated 3 times. Sato looked toward the door. He noticed the false archive was untouched. Yura rolled her shoulder. "Finally, I was starting to feel underappreciated." Rin tucked the black ledger away. "Take the ledgers." The shrine vault doors opened before Sato could gather the 3rd book. Temple examiner Baron stood outside with 8 guards and a silver crescent relic in one hand. His robes were white-edged in black prayer script. His head was shaved. His eyes went first to the ledgers, then to Rin's injured wrist, then to Renka. He missed very little. Rin Akatsuki Baron said, "Weapons inside a charity house. That image will serve us well." Rin closed the white ledger. "Only if you control who sees the basement." Baron's expression did not shift. "There is no basement." Renka flinched. Rin saw Baron see it. The examiner lifted the silver relic. Its crescent mirror caught the lamplight, and a red jewel glowed inside the handle. "Stand before purity," Baron said. "If your accusations are true, the relic will clear you." Sato whispered, "Please do not accept tests administered by criminals." Rin stepped forward anyway. "I want to see the lie work." The relic glowed red before Rin came within arm's reach. The guard straightened. Baron allowed himself a small breath of satisfaction. "Corruption answers purity," he said. Rin tilted his head and studied the relic, not the light. The glow pulsed evenly. Too evenly. Sacred tools, real ones, responded like living things. This light was mechanical, a court trick wearing temple silver. He tapped the side with his sword pommel. The red glow flickered. Baron's eyes moved. There. Rin struck the casing harder. The silver crescent cracked, and a dark red shard dropped from inside the handle, landing on the stone floor with a tiny click. The room went silent. Sato stared at the shard. "That is Demonstone." One guard took a step back. Rin looked at the men holding swords. 7 provinces banned treated Demonstone after the Red Winter. Your examiner calls it purity. Baron recovered faster than most men would have. Kill them. The shrine vault turned into a mess in seconds. Donation boxes toppled. Scroll cabinets cracked open. Yura fought 2 guards in the doorway where nobody had enough space to swing properly, which suited her fine because she fought like space was an opinion. Sato grabbed the white ledgers and crawled behind a low altar, shouting at people to avoid stepping on evidence. It was not heroic, but it was deeply sincere. Renka cut the rope around a locked inner screen with shaking hands. Behind it was a stairway leading down. Children's voices rose from below. Renka whispered Kyo. Rin saw Baron move toward the stairway. The examiner's sword came out from under his robe, short and narrow. He did not fight like a ceremonial priest. He cut low toward Rin's wounded wrist, which meant someone in the capital had told him exactly where the old hero was damaged. Rin let the blade graze his sleeve and stepped inside the angle. He drove his shoulder into Baron's chest, slammed him against the relic cabinet, and pressed his sword under the man's jaw. "Blood oath," Rin said. Baron breathed hard through his nose. "You think forced words are truth? You built a hall full of forced words." Rin cut Baron's palm and pressed it against the open black ledger. The page drank the blood. Baron tried to pull away. The book held him still, with ink curling around his fingers like black thread. Words formed across the page. "I, Baron Examiner of the Moon Temple, held dependents under charity status to secure testimony for court and crown. I authorized purity relic alteration under private order. I received sealed instruction from Minister Nari Hoshino. I acted under protection of Princess Tama Sayonji. When the last character formed the ledger released him." Baron looked at the words as if they belonged to someone else. Then Yura appeared beside Rin, breathing hard. "Lower wards open. Toki is moving the children." The fight was ending. 2 guards had surrendered. 1 had run. The remaining men were down or bound. The stairway below filled with small footsteps coughing, and Isis clipped instructions as she wrapped children in blankets and moved them toward the wagons. Renka found Kyo in the second room. He was thin, feverish, and alive. She stopped in front of him like she had reached a shrine and did not know if she was allowed to touch it. Kyo looked at her for a long, confused moment. Then he grabbed her sleeve with both hands. Renka folded around him and made a sound that barely counted as crying. Rin looked away. Some pain did not need an audience. They emptied Tsurumi Hall before dawn, but Rin left the building standing. That choice mattered. If he burned it, Tama would get ashes. Ashes were easy to mourn. Walls covered in records were much harder to explain. Issei moved the dependents into wagons. 23 people from the lower ward, including children, old parents, 6 siblings, and 3 wounded veterans whose pensions had been converted into temple-managed relief. Toki led them out with a lantern jaw clenched, acting like he had done this kind of thing all his life. He did not look proud. He looked responsible. That was heavier. Sato copied key pages by lamplight so quickly his fingers cramped. He cursed the ink, the rain, the table height, and at one point his own hand for lacking moral endurance. Yura gathered weapons keys and the temple guard roster. Renka stayed with Kyo until Rin sent her to identify the witness rooms. She went without arguing. Before the morning bread line formed outside the front gate, Rin placed Beren in the courtyard beneath the saintess charity crest. The Demonstone shard sat inside a glass alms box at his feet. Copies of coercion records covered the white walls. When the gates opened, the poor families outside expected rice tickets. They found the truth instead. At first, they stood there like people afraid the wrong reaction might cost them food. Then a mother in the front recognized her niece's name on a dependent transfer list. She walked to the wall, read it twice, and pressed both palms against the paper as if she could hold the child through ink. A one-legged veteran found his pension listed under temple conversion and sat down in the mud. A merchant clerk from the donor office saw his master's family seal beside witness preparation fee and backed away, not from horror, but calculation. He understood which houses would start lying before noon. A temple sister began crying quietly. Another tore off her moon badge and threw it into the gutter. A third just stared at the wall lips moving over names she had probably tucked into bed without knowing why they were there. The crowd did not become one brave mass. It became 20 separate wounds. That was harder to control. Beren tried to speak. These documents are cursed fabrications. Sato stepped forward with the Demonstone shard held in iron tongs. He looked exhausted, muddy, and angrier than any scholar had a right to be. Then explain why your purity relic uses banned borderstone. Beren's silence gave the crowd more than a confession would have. Rin read the blood oath aloud. Plainly, no performance. He let Beren's own words do the damage. When he finished, Beren looked up from beneath the charity crest. You cannot judge the temple. Rin stepped close. I am judging the man standing in front of me. The execution was clean. Rin left Beren hanging beneath the outer gate with copies of the records around him and the demon stone shard sealed in the alms box below. Rain turned the white banners gray. The body made the image spread. The documents made it survive. Rin left most of the grain with the waiting families. He took the ledgers, the dependents, the illegal relic shard coin boxes tied directly to witness coercion, and every document bearing Tama's saintess seal. Sato insisted on making a receipt. Yura stared at him. What? Sato said. If we become thieves in the records, they win half the argument. Yura looked at the coin boxes, then back at him. You are the only man I know who can make robbery sound audited. It is not robbery, it is seizure of criminal instruments. That is worse. I understood robbery. Rin let them argue because the wagons needed loading and tired people moved better when annoyance kept them upright. By evening, Tsurumi Hall had no dependents, no examiner, no real ledgers, and no functioning purity relic. Its walls still stood covered in names the temple had hoped would stay quiet. The first real crack in the saintess charity network opened in public in daylight, in front of the people who had paid for its kindness with copper coins and trust. The capital heard before midnight. This time, Minister Nari spilled a little tea. Only a little. He stared at the report in his private chamber while the courier knelt with his head nearly touching the floor. Beren's blood oath had already been copied by too many hands. The Demonstone shard had been seen by poor families' temple sisters and at least one merchant clerk with a memory sharp enough to become expensive. The dependents were gone. The ledgers were gone. Worst of all, people in the lower districts had started using a phrase Nari disliked immediately. The Black Dawn returned stolen names. Names were dangerous. Coin could be replaced. A dead examiner could be mourned. Names made families search old receipts, question sealed transfers, and ask why mercy needed locks. Nari summoned palace physician Jomei. The physician arrived sweating despite the cool night. Nari disliked that. Fear should be private unless it served a purpose. Baron is dead, Nari said. Jomei lowered his head. I heard. The maid Renka is alive. Rin has charity ledgers. The illegal relic stone was displayed publicly. Shizu Hozuki has been too quiet. Lord K is asking about prayer hall doors. Jomei's fingers twitched. The doors? Do not repeat things like a parrot in expensive robes. The physician went pale. Nari leaned back. Tomorrow you will confirm publicly that demon influence can corrupt memories, alter written impressions, and imitate sacred responses. That is medically difficult to defend. Then sound deeply saddened while saying it. And the original relic? It will be destroyed during cleansing tonight. Jomei nodded too fast. After he left, Nari summoned Shizu Hozuki. She arrived with ink on one sleeve and her hair tied neatly as if being called to a minister's chamber after midnight was an ordinary filing dispute. She bowed at the correct depth. Nari found that irritating. People should reveal more when cornered. You have worked hard during this crisis, he said. Records require steadiness, minister. Records require loyalty. Accurate records are loyalty to the kingdom, Nari said. The words sat there polished and poisonous. He placed a sealed order on the table. You are promoted temporarily to emergency record supervisor for the Akatsuki corruption inquiry. Shizu lowered her eyes to the seal. A promotion. A locked door with better calligraphy. You honor me, she said. I do. You will remain inside the record wing until further notice. For security. We cannot risk Rin Akatsuki reaching another impressionable clerk. I am not impressionable. No, that is what makes you inconvenient. 2 guards entered behind her. Shizu's fingers tightened once around her sleeve, then relaxed. Nari watched closely. You knew him at the border. I recorded casualty routes. You spoke with him. I spoke with many officers. Did you believe him during the trial? Shizu looked at the sealed order. Her silence lasted just long enough to become dangerous. I believed the records were incomplete, she said. Nari smiled. That is why I chose you. You love incomplete things. They give you purpose. He pushed the order toward her. Tomorrow in the public inquiry hall, you will review the West Prayer Hall files. You will clarify that all irregularities came from demon contamination after Rin's escape. You will confirm the saintess's testimony remains pure. And if the records do not support that, then the kingdom will mourn how deeply Rin corrupted you. Shizu looked up at him. For the first time that night, anger showed. It was small, controlled, and gone almost immediately. Nari noticed anyway. Remove her personal ink set, he told the guards. That hurt her more than the threat. Her face did not break, but something behind it flinched. Nari enjoyed that. Everyone had a throat. Some were simply hidden under stranger things than skin. At the Moon Temple, Princess Tama dismissed her attendants and stood alone before the goddess statue. In public, she had wept twice that evening. Once for poor examiner Baron, once for the dependents supposedly kidnapped by Rin's demon faction. The priests praised her strength. Noble ladies sent condolence flowers. The rich district still believed her, partly because she was beautiful when wounded, partly because believing Rin meant admitting charity had become a hostage market under their own noses. Tama removed her veil and looked into the polished shrine mirror. She did not look frightened. She looked awake. Kei Toma entered without permission. That was new. Tama turned slowly. Lord K. He bowed, but the bow was shallower than usual. I want to inspect the West Prayer Hall. At this hour. Tomorrow. It is sealed for cleansing. Because Rin mentioned the doors? Her smile held. That was one of Tama's gifts. People who expected guilt to look ugly always struggled with beautiful composure. Rin is skilled at planting doubt, she said. He was a poor liar when I saw him. You saw a condemned man trying to survive. I saw a man in chains correct my sword grip. Irritation touched her eyes before she hid it. Kay continued quieter now. The official testimony says the prayer hall doors were barred from inside. They were. They open inward. Tama stepped down from the shrine platform. Do you think grief remembers hinges? Kay did not answer. She came closer, soft enough to seem hurt, close enough that stepping back would look cruel. Rin saved this kingdom, she said. I know that more than anyone. That is why this hurts. If I wanted him erased, I could have let the court execute him. I begged for exile. Kay's jaw tightened. That was a beautiful lie because part of it wore truth's clothing. She had asked for exile publicly. The private execution order was not in her handwriting, not where Kay could see it. If you doubt me, Tama said, then bring him alive. Let the court test him. Let the goddess judge him in front of everyone. Kay looked at her for a long moment. He wanted to believe her. That was the sad part. He needed the world to be arranged in clean shapes. Saintess monster new hero, fallen hero. Rin's questions had started bending the lines, and Kay did not know what to do with a battlefield where the enemy's evidence made more sense than the court's prayers. I will bring him in, Kay said. Alive? If he lets me. Tama's voice softened. Do not let admiration disguise itself as mercy. Kay bowed and left. Once he was gone, Tama's expression cooled. Nari promised me a clean replacement, she whispered to the empty shrine. This one thinks too loudly. At Higan Fort, Rin spent the Tsurumi money before Sato finished counting it. Sato considered this a personal attack. They bought lumber through 3 villages so no single merchant could be punished for selling to Higan. They paid in silver shaved clean of temple markings. They bought grain lamp oil, medicine, rope nails, paper ink, spare cloaks, and tools. 2 blacksmith brothers joined after finding their father's unpaid death compensation inside Kanza's records. A widow brought 3 bundles of bedding and asked for no payment, only a copy of the page that proved her husband had not deserted. Rin gave it to her himself. She held the paper with both hands. Her son, maybe 6, hid behind her skirt and stared at Rin's black cloak. My husband prayed for you, she said. Rin did not know what to do with that, so he said he should have been paid. The widow laughed once, but it broke halfway through. That too. Higan changed quickly after Tsurumi, the old barracks filled with rescued dependents. Issei organized food portions with such authority that grown men apologized to her before taking extra rice. Yura trained lookouts along the wall and separated real fighters from men who only liked the sound of their own revenge. Toki ran messages between rooms and tried very hard not to stare at the children from the lower ward, especially Kyo, who followed Renka like a shadow, afraid someone might close another door. Renka remained under watch. She helped identify testimony rooms, temple routes, servant marks, and charity seals. Some people still wanted her gone. Rin understood that. He did not ask anyone to forgive her. He only required that they use her truth before spending their anger. On the 4th day after Tsurumi, a farmer arrived with a folded paper hidden under turnips. His landlord had listed 3 sons as deserters and taken their military pay. The farmer did not ask Rin to avenge them. He asked whether dead men could still have their names corrected. On the 5th day, 2 former Dawn Guard soldiers came wearing old cloaks turned inside out. They did not kneel. Rin preferred that. One said, "We served under Captain Yori." Rin stopped repairing the gate hinge. "Yori died clean," Rin said. The soldier's mouth tightened. His widow did not. She died waiting for compensation Lord Kanza had already taken. I know. We want work. Rin looked at their hands, scarred, steady. Men used to cold mornings and worse orders. Can you follow rules? The second soldier gave a humorless smile. We followed royal orders for 10 years. Rules are easy. What is hard? Finding rules worth keeping. Rin handed them tools instead of swords. Start with the gate. Higan was still too small to look dangerous on a military map. A broken fort rescued families, stolen ledgers, 2 former soldiers, 3 goats that caused more trouble than morale justified, and a condemned hero the kingdom had failed to kill. But people were walking there with complaints they had never dared bring to royal offices. That changed the value of the place. Rin began hearing petitions beneath a cracked roof with the black ledger closed beside him until evidence came. He refused cases with no proof. A merchant tried to use Higan against a rival and left with a barley fine for wasting ink. A farmer wanted Rin to punish his brother-in-law for stealing a goat, and Yura had to leave the room before her laughter became treason against the dignity of the court. A former estate guard confessed he had beaten debtors for Kanza and asked to join before anyone recognized him. Rin recognized him and assigned him 3 days repairing the widow barracks under Ice's supervision before allowing him near wooden training weapons. The system was rough, dangerous, held together by rules written on planks and people too angry to go home. Still, it heard what the capital had refused to hear. Sato eventually confronted Rin with a blank sheet. "We need categories," he said. Rin looked up from a copied Tsurumi ledger. "For what?" "For cases. Crimes under document proof. Crimes under witness proof. Crimes needing ledger confirmation. Crimes outside reach. Requests that are actually family arguments wearing legal clothing. Long title. This is not the title. This is administration. The thing you accidentally invented." Rin leaned back. Sato pushed the blank sheet closer. "Also, the court needs a name." Yura, sharpening a blade nearby, did not look up. "If Sato names it, we'll need 2 pages and a glossary." Toki appeared in the doorway with a water bucket. "Black Dawn Court." Everyone looked at him. He shrugged. "People already say Black Dawn. Court tells them it has rules. Also, it sounds good." Yura narrowed her eye. "That is annoyingly decent." Sato considered the blank sheet, visibly pained by the idea that Toki might be right. Issei entered with tea and settled the matter by saying easy names travel farther. Rin stared at the paper. The capital had called him Beast. The temple called him Corrupted. The road villages had started calling him Judgment. None of those names were neutral, and neutrality had died somewhere between the palace stairs and Kurikiba Ravine. He picked up the brush and wrote, "Black Dawn Court of Higan." Sato sanded the ink before anyone could regret it. The first official notice left Higan at sunrise. It was short because Sato refused to write like a drunk prince declaring destiny from a balcony. The notice listed rules, evidence requirements, and the judgments already passed on Kanza Mibu and Baron of Tsurumi Hall. It declared protection for witnesses held through coercion. It warned nobles, priests, officers, and tax officials that forged records, stolen war payments, hostage testimony, false exile orders, and altered relics would be treated as capital crimes under Higan judgment. At the bottom, Rin added one line by hand. "If royal law wants its authority back, it may begin by telling the truth." Copies appeared in 3 road villages by noon, at Tsurumi Market by evening, at the southern toll office before midnight. One copy was nailed to a Moon Temple donation board while the local priest was inside changing robes. The public did not fall in love with Rin after one notice. Most people were too scared, too loyal to the saintess, or too invested in the court's story to change sides that quickly. But they read. Some read twice. Some tore the paper down and still remembered the line about false exile orders. Poor families asked each other what witness coercion meant. Border veterans folded copies into their sleeves. Merchants began checking whether their private seals appeared in public records. Nari's problem changed shape. Rin was no longer only killing corrupt men. People were starting to treat Higan like a place where royal law could be challenged. The emergency council met that night in the palace inquiry chamber. Minister Nari stood at the head of the table with the Black Dawn notice spread before him. Around him sat 3 noble lords, 2 temple officials, the palace physician Jomei and Kei Toma in silver armor that looked less ceremonial than before because he had stopped standing like a statue. Princess Tama sat behind a moon screen visible enough to be honored, hidden enough to remain untouchable. Nari tapped the notice once. "He is building legitimacy." One noble snorted. "With farmers?" "With grievances," Nari said. "Farmers die. Grievances inherit." That quieted the table. Kay read the notice again. His eyes stopped on false exile orders. "I want the original trial records inspected by someone outside the temple." Jomei shifted in his seat. Nari smiled. "You will inspect Rin Akatsuki when you bring him in." "That is not what I asked." "No, it is what you were appointed to do." Behind the screen, Tama spoke gently. "Lord Kay only wants certainty." Nari bowed toward her silhouette. "Certainty will come after order is restored." Kay looked at the screen. Before, the veil between Tama and the room had seemed respectful. Now it bothered him. He could hear her voice but not read her face. Rin's words about the doors kept returning at inconvenient times. Nari continued. At dawn, Lord K will lead a purification force to the southern road. Rin Akatsuki is to be captured if possible, killed if necessary. Any village sheltering Black Dawn notices will surrender its copies and identify distributors. A temple official asked, And the record keeper? K looked up. What record keeper? Nari folded his hands. Shizu Hozuki has been placed under emergency protection. Evidence suggests Rin may have corrupted palace records through her. Tomorrow, during the public inquiry, she will clarify the official timeline. K's voice lowered. Clarify? Nari's smile did not move, or confess. Behind the screen, Tama's prayer beads clicked once. At Higan Fort, the black ledger opened during supper. The room went quiet in a way Rin was starting to recognize, the kind of quiet people made when they hoped the cursed book had chosen someone else's problem. Ink spread across a fresh page. Record keeper seized. Location, Palace Inquiry Hall. Time, dawn. Prepared accusation. Collusion with Rin Akatsuki, falsification of trial records. Demon influence. Rin read the lines once. Toki whispered, Shizu? Sato's face lost color. If they force her to confess publicly, they can poison every record she touched. The prayer hall logs the decree, timing the seal, copies the message she sent us. All of it becomes demon corruption. Yura stood from the bench. Then we take her. From the palace? Sato asked. Yura looked at him. You always say the location like it changes what hands do. Renka stepped forward from the lower doorway. Kyo stood behind her, fingers gripping her sleeve. There is an old incense passage behind the moon screen, she said. During saintess ceremonies, servants use it to carry censers to the inquiry balcony. Priests hate it because the beams are low and the passage stains white robes. Yura's mouth curved. A hallway designed by someone who disliked priests. Good. Sato pressed both palms to the table. We have held Higan for barely a week. The gate still leans. Half our people are refugees. The capital is waiting for a mistake, large enough to hang on every notice board. Rin looked at the ledger again. Record keeper seized. He saw Shizu on the palace stairs, one step forward, stopped by Nari's glance. He saw her message burning over the lamp. He saw the last line she had written smaller than the rest. I should have stepped forward. I know that. Rin had been angry at her for stopping. He still was. But anger did not change the fact that she moved after when movement had a cost. The court had noticed. Now they were going to turn her guilt into a weapon and make her cut her own throat in public with words they wrote for her. Rin closed the black ledger. We do not storm the palace. Sato let out one careful breath. Rin picked up his sword. We attend the inquiry. Sato's relief lasted half a second. Then the sentence finished reaching him, and he visibly regretted having hope. Outside, Higan Fort moved under torchlight. Yura called scouts and chose only people who could follow silence. Issei packed food medicine and clean cloth with the speed of a woman who understood emergencies better than officials did. Renka drew the incense passage again, this time marking balcony beams, servant hooks, and the place where guards rarely looked because no noble ever entered through a dirty wall. Toki saddled horses before anyone told him to stay behind. Rin found him tightening a strap too hard. You are not coming inside the palace. Toki's shoulders stiffened. I can help. You can. That is why you stay with the exit wagon. The boy turned angry and trying not to look like a child. You always put me near exits, because exits decide whether rescues matter. That stopped him. Rin crouched and loosened the strap Toki had pulled too tight. If we come out with Shizu Renka or wounded people, they reach you first. If we do not come out, you take the records to Higan. No heroics, no chasing, no proving anything to people who already trust you enough to give you the records. Toki looked down at the saddle. People trust me? Rin stood. I just said it. Try to keep up. Toki wiped his face with his sleeve and pretended it was rain, even though they were under a roof. Near the gate, Sado packed copies of Kanza's execution order, Byron's blood oath, the Tsurumi ledger pages, the Demonstone shard, Renka's written testimony, and a blank confession sheet he claimed was for optimism, unfortunately. Yura checked her knives without joking. Isi handed Rin a wrapped cloth of rice cakes and dried meat. For Shizu, she said. Rin looked at the bundle. Isi's expression did not soften. People speak better after food. Even brave ones. Rin took it. At the gate, the rule boards hung under torchlight. Children are never targets. Servants live unless they choose the master's sword. Titles do not hide guilt. Evidence first. Mercy, if earned. The court may answer in blood or truth. I accept either.
Below them, the first notice of the Black Dawn Court had been nailed into the wood. The ink had dried crooked in one corner where the rain reached it. It looked rough, almost embarrassing, and more real because of that. Rin touched the broken royal medal tied at his belt. 6 days earlier, the capital dragged him through Judgment Road as a condemned man, while Shizu stood on the palace stairs holding records she could not speak aloud. At dawn, the same palace would put her in the inquiry hall and force her to either lie for the saintess or be destroyed as his accomplice. Rin looked north toward the white walls of the capital. Yura stepped beside him. You know this is a trap. Yes, you know Nari wants you angry. Yes, you angry? Rin thought about Shizu's bent scroll Renka's throat seal. Kyo's hand clutching his sister's sleeve, the widow holding proof her husband had not deserted, and the people in the capital who still believed law was whatever the palace announced loudest. I am past angry. Yura studied him, then nodded once. They left before midnight. Black crows lifted from Higan's broken watchtower and crossed the valley ahead of them, cutting dark shapes through the moonlit fog. By dawn, the palace inquiry hall was already full. Shizu Hazuki stood at the center in plain record-keeper robes, her hands unbound because Nari understood appearances. Her ink set was gone. Her sleeves were clean. That made her look smaller, somehow stripped of the tools that made her herself. Minister Nari stood beside the inquiry table with the original West Prayer Hall files arranged before him. Princess Tama waited behind the moon screen, white veil lowered. Kei Toma stood near the front with one hand resting on Rika's hilt, watching Shizu instead of the crowd. Nari raised his voice. Record Keeper Hazuki, for the safety of the kingdom, you will now clarify how Rin Akatsuki corrupted the trial records after his exile. Shasu looked at the files. The hall waited for her to choose between a lie and a grave. Then from somewhere above the moon screen, a black feather drifted down and landed on the inquiry table. Kei saw it first. His hand tightened on his sword. Nari stopped speaking. Behind the screen, Tama's prayer beads went still. And in the narrow incense balcony above them, Rin Akatsuki opened the black ledger. The black feather landed on the inquiry table, and Minister Nari Hoshino's mouth stayed open around a sentence he no longer controlled. One feather should not have been able to change a royal hall. It had no blade, no seal, no army behind it that anyone could see. But it lay there between the West Prayer Hall files and the confession. Shizu Hazuki had been ordered to read dark against polished cedar, and the room understood the message before anyone spoke. Rin Akatsuki had reached the inquiry. The hall went quiet in a way that made breathing feel like testimony. The nobles in the front row drew their sleeves closer as if the feather might stain silk. Temple officials looked up at the incense balcony above the moon screen and realized a little too late that old servant passages had existed long before their ceremonial seating charts. A young court scribe stared at the feather, then at the files, then down at his own tablet, as if deciding whether ink could protect him from politics. Kei Tama's hand settled on Rika's hilt. Behind the moon screen, Princess Tama's prayer beads stopped moving. Shizu did not look up immediately. Her eyes stayed on the feather. Rin watched her from the incense balcony, crouched behind carved beams blackened by years of smoke. The passage was narrow, filthy, and low enough to punish anyone wearing ceremonial robes. Renka had been right about that. Priests would hate it. Rin almost respected the old architects for building one dirty root behind all that holiness. Yura waited behind him with two short blades, her face wrapped in dark cloth against the incense dust. Sado knelt farther back, clutching copied ledgers, sealed testimonies, the Demonstone shard, and enough loose pages to bury a minister in paperwork. Renka stayed near the rear turn of the passage, pale but steady, because she knew every servant route in this part of the palace, and because running from her testimony had already cost one maid her life. Outside the palace, Toki waited with the exit wagon and the backup records. Rin had left him with the most important instruction if nobody came out right to Higan and make sure the papers did. Rin opened the black ledger. The book drank the light around it. Ink shifted across the page, arranging the current chain of proof in brutal order. Genda's execution command, Renka's contradiction, Baron's Blood Oath, the Demon Stone Shard, the Surumi Ledgers, Shizu's smuggled note, the prayer hall door record. The ink moved again slower this time and began drawing the shape of the inquiry hall itself into the margins as if the room had become another piece of evidence. Minister Nari recovered first. Seal the hall, he ordered. The side doors slammed shut. Royal guards moved into position along the walls, hands on sword hilts' faces, disciplined enough to look calm and tense enough to prove they were not. Several nobles whispered behind fans. A temple official started praying under his breath while checking the exits between every third word. Kei looked up toward the balcony, then to Shizu, then toward the moon screen, hiding Tama. The new hero was finally noticing how many stages the court used at once. Nari raised his voice. Rin Akatsuki has invaded a royal proceeding through forbidden access. Let every witness here remember that the man claiming innocence chooses shadows over lawful summons. Rin stepped into view above the screen. A woman near the front covered her mouth. A merchant lord stopped reaching for a fallen paper fan halfway down and forgot to finish the movement. One of the older soldiers guarding the west wall stared at Rin's wrapped wrist, then at the brand, burned into his collarbone, and his face tightened with something that did not look like loyalty. Rin looked nothing like the man dragged through Judgment Road, even though the damage was still there. The wound above his brow had closed badly. His left wrist was wrapped in black cloth, where the cuff hinge tore skin away. The temple brand sat at his collarbone like a stain the court wanted everyone to see. At his belt hung the broken royal medal they had stripped from him, tied there without polish, without pride, more like a receipt than an honor. A nobleman whispered, "He came back." His wife whispered, "Idiot, keep your voice down." Shizu finally looked up. Their eyes met across the hall. Rin did not nod. He could not afford softness in front of this many enemies, and she would have hated being treated like something fragile anyway. But he saw the exhaustion beneath her eyes. He saw her missing ink set. He saw the way her hands rested flat on the table because she knew Nari would turn even a tremor into evidence. Nari saw the exchange and moved quickly. "Record Keeper Hazuki," he said, his voice sharpening. "Continue." The prepared confession lay in front of her. From above, Rin could see the handwriting clearly enough to know she had not written it. The loops were too round, the phrasing too dramatic. Whoever drafted it imagined guilt as theater. Shiksu wrote like a woman who believed bad punctuation could damage civilization. She picked up the paper. The hall waited for her to bury herself. "I, Shitsu Hazuki." She read senior record keeper of the palace archive. Her voice was steady, was ordered to clarify the official timeline regarding Rin Akatsuki's corruption inquiry. Nari's left eyelid moved. The room did not catch it yet. Rin did. Shazu continued. "The document placed before me claims I falsified royal records under demon influence. I did not write this statement. It contains 3 dating errors, 2 seal errors, and a phrase from the internal temple-style guide, which palace archivists are not permitted to use in court filings." A temple official stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "This is improper." Shizu turned the page with the calm of someone correcting an inventory mistake. Improper records are often where crimes begin. That line traveled through the clerks at the back before it reached the nobles. Rin watched the junior scribes lower their eyes to their tablets. They were not cheering. They were doing something more dangerous in that room. They were listening like professionals. Nari struck the table with one hand. "Enough." Shizu continued anyway. "The original exile decree was registered before the formal complaint from Her Highness entered the West Prayer Hall archive. The physician's report exists in 2 inks. The guard rotation for that corridor was removed after the accusation. The West Prayer Hall doors open inward, which contradicts the sworn testimony, stating the outer door was barred from inside, while guards forced entry. Koi's fingers tightened around Rika. He had asked about the doors. Now the record keeper had said it in front of the inquiry hall. Nari stepped closer to Shizu. "You have been corrupted." Shazu looked at him without lowering her head. "No, minister. I was afraid." The sentence struck harder because it was not heroic. It did not decorate itself. Shazu's fingers tightened around the false confession. "I stood on the palace stairs and stopped when you looked at me. I knew the documents were wrong, and I told myself surviving 1 more hour would let me find proof. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was cowardice wearing a useful coat. I will answer for that later. I will not create another false record to excuse the first one." The court clerks at the back changed posture almost together. Slightly straighter, pens closer to paper. Men and women who had spent their lives recording the words of powerful people, while pretending the pressure in the room did not shape the ink. Now, one of their own had named the pressure. Princess Tama's voice came from behind the screen. Shizu, soft, hurt. Intimate enough that half the hall turned toward it before thinking. Tama stepped out. Her veil was lowered but thin enough to show the tears gathered under her lashes. White robes brushed the floor. gold prayer thread caught the lamplight. She looked wounded, generous, patient. Rin understood the performance so well now that he could almost see the seams. "I do not blame you," Tama said to Shizu. "Rin has harmed many minds since he fled to Higan. If he reached your records, if he reached your guilt, perhaps even your courage is being used by him." Shizu's mouth pressed tighter. Tama turned her face toward the balcony. "Rin," she said. The hall leaned into the name. She made it sound private, and people loved being allowed to overhear private pain. "If the man who once protected this kingdom still lives inside you, come down. Do not hide above us with frightened women and stolen pages." Yura behind Rin breathed through her nose in visible irritation. She did not speak. The hall was too tense for jokes, and she knew it. Rin also knew Tama's target. She was not really talking to him. She was rebuilding the room. Kei stepped forward. "Rin Akatsuki." Rin looked down at him. Kei's voice carried cleanly. "Did you force Her Highness in the West Prayer Hall?" The question cut through ceremony with no decoration. The nobles hated it. The priests hated it more. A blunt question was hard to steer. Rin answered the same way. "No." Tama lowered her eyes, and several noblewomen shifted towards sympathy again. She did not need the whole room. She only needed enough of it. Kei did not look away from Rin. "Then prove it without stacking more bodies under your evidence." Nari snapped Lord Kei. Kei ignored him. Rin studied the new hero. Kei had stood on the palace stairs during the humiliation. He had accepted Rin's title while the old one was still warm from being stripped away. He had believed what suited his rise, at least at first, but the boy had started asking the kind of questions that made him troublesome to the people who chose him. Rin lifted the black ledger. "I did not come for approval from the court." Sato pushed the first bundle of papers through the balcony opening. They fell into the hall in black-edged sheets. Baron's blood oath, Tsurumi charity ledgers, Demonstone analysis written in Sato's furious hand, Renka's written statement, Genda's execution order showing Rin's death had been ordered before the exile transfer, Shizu's copied note regarding the altered prayer hall log. Every page had been copied twice and marked with the Black Dawn half-sun. The papers did not fall gracefully. Some spun into nobles' laps. One landed in a priest's teacup. Several struck the floor and slid under boots. A court clerk picked up a page and froze over the first line. A royal guard stepped on another, looked down by reflex, and read enough for his mouth to tighten. One temple official tried gathering the pages into his robe. A young scribe grabbed his wrist. They stared at each other. The scribe released him first, but his eyes had already reached the seal line. That made him a problem Nari could not conveniently unmake in front of everyone. Nari raised his voice over the murmurs. "Forged documents spread by a condemned criminal have no standing." Sato leaned too far out from the balcony before Rin could stop him. The Demonstone shard was displayed at Tsurumi Hall in front of 37 public witnesses, including donor clerks from houses Miyabe Fuyutsuki and Rando. "I have copied seals from the donation sheets tied to the same ledger. If those houses deny seeing the shard, please ask them to do it in writing. It will make prosecution tidier." A few people looked up. Sato seemed to realize he had spoken loudly enough for nobles to remember his face. He ducked behind the beam with immediate regret. Nari's expression stayed composed, but his hand closed around the edge of the inquiry table until the knuckles whitened. Then, palace physician Jome saved Rin several minutes by panicking. He stepped forward too quickly, robe him, catching on his shoe. "The former hero is using demon influence," Jome said. His voice shook, so he forced it louder. "Memory disturbance record, imitation, emotional contamination. These are known risks of prolonged border exposure. Her Highness's injuries were examined under sacred procedure." "I stand by my report." Rin looked at him. Jome's words were too fast, too polished, and aimed at the room instead of the evidence. Fear had turned him into a sermon. Shazu placed two reports side by side on the table. "Your first report lists the examination at second bell." Jome blinked. She placed another page beside it. "The court copy lists third bell? A copying error. The ink on both reports matches your private medical kit. The wording changes only after Temple Examiner Baron's seal appears." Jome glanced at Nari. A small mistake. Expensive. Kei saw it. Rin saw Kei see it. The black ledger opened wider in Rin's hand. New ink appeared. Physician contradiction exposed. Blood oath available. Rin moved before Nari could turn the moment into noise. He dropped from the balcony onto the moon screen frame, then down to the inquiry floor. Guards rushed toward him. Yura landed a breath later and blocked the first two with both blades. Rin crossed the floor toward Jome. Kei drew Rika and stepped into his path. Their swords met once. The ring of steel cut through the room. Kei's stance had changed since Judgment Road. His thumb was placed properly now he had listened. Rin's eyes shifted to the grip. "You fixed it." Kei's jaw tightened. "You are under arrest. After the physician speaks. He can speak in custody. He is already in custody. The room just has the wrong owner." Rin pushed Kay's sword aside with angle rather than strength. Kay adjusted fast enough to avoid being disarmed. Better than before. Real talent then. Not enough experience, but enough talent to be dangerous once the court stopped polishing him and let him bleed. Nari shouted Lord Kay cut him down. Kay did not move. The hesitation lasted only a breath. In a sword fight that was nearly nothing in court politics, it was a page of evidence. Rin stepped around him, caught Yomei by the collar, and slammed the physician's hand onto the table beside the original report. The black ledger opened under Rin's palm. Yomei tried to pull away. Rin cut the man's palm with the edge of a broken seal knife and pressed it to the page. Who ordered the second report? Demon book! Yomei gasped. Rin leaned closer. You wrote false injury records, poisoned my cuff spikes, and signed my body over to an execution escort before the exile cart left the city. If you want a priest, call one. If you want time, answer. Yomei looked at Nari. Nari did not help him. The physician understood his place then. Useful tools were kept in drawers. Used ones were left on tables. His voice broke low. I revised the report under Minister Hoshino's instruction. The ledger drank the blood. Words formed across the page where the hall could see. I, Jomei Palace Physician, altered the West Prayer Hall report after temple review. I administered numbing poison to Rin Akatsuki's restraint wounds before exile transfer. I received payment through the Saintess Charity Fund and authorization through Minister Nari Hoshino's office. A noble lord near the front stood so fast his chair scraped across the floor. He had the face of a man whose donation ledger had just become a weapon pointed backward. Jomei clutched Rin's sleeve. I did not invent the claim, I only adjusted the report. I can testify, protect me. There was the bargain. Corrupt men often discovered truth right after the safer lie stopped sheltering them. Nari moved 2 fingers near his sleeve. A royal guard along the wall lifted a small crossbow hidden beneath his cloak. Rin noticed the cloth shift. Kay noticed Rin noticing. Kay struck the crossbow up. The bolt fired into a ceiling beam. A second bolt came from the opposite wall. Rin pulled Yomei aside, but the bolt hit the physician low in the ribs. Jomei collapsed against the inquiry table, scattering reports under his sleeve. The hall broke open into shouting. Nobles lurched away from the table. Temple officials ducked behind chairs. Several clerks dropped to their knees, not in prayer, but to gather pages before soldiers could trample them. Tama stepped back behind the moon screen. Nara's face hardened at the failed cleanup, and that was the closest thing to panic he allowed the room to see. Jomei coughed and grabbed at Rin's cloak. I can still, no, Rin said quietly. You cannot. Jomei's eyes searched his face for mercy. A younger Rin might have tried to save him. The version of Rin who still believed courtrooms were built for truth would have pressed cloth to the wound, shouted for a healer, and protected the man, because a witness mattered. But Jomei had poisoned him for a quiet execution. He had turned medicine into a blade and signed the handle. Rin placed Jomei against one of the inquiry pillars. The physician was fading fast. Rin took the altered report and pinned it above him with the seal knife. Then he tied Yomei's red medical sash around the pillar, binding him upright beneath his own lie. The image was clean enough for the hall to understand, and ugly enough to stay with them, the court physician. His altered report, his blood oath, his payment route through the Saintess Charity Fund. Rin wrote one sentence across the margin. A false hand wrote this. He stepped back. It was not mercy. It was record-keeping. Kay stared at the dying physician, then at Nari. You ordered the shot. Nari's voice stayed smooth. A corrupted criminal seized a witness. The guard acted to protect the hall. He shot the witness. He prevented contamination. Kay's anger did not flare, it settled. Rin preferred that organized anger could survive a room. Rin turned toward the moon screen. Tama. The hall chilled around her name. Princess Tama stepped out again. She looked at Jomei, the pinned report, the scattered evidence, and Shizu standing over the inquiry files with both hands flat on the table. Then Tama made the strongest move left to her. She wept quietly, beautifully, one tear, then another. Enough to remind the hall she was the named victim, enough to make Rin, standing near a dying physician with a bloody seal knife, look exactly like the story she wanted told. Is this what you wanted? Tama asked. Rin watched her. You kill priests, physicians, lords? You drag frightened women into your revenge. You fill a royal hall with forbidden pages and call it truth. Her voice broke gently in a place that made several nobles turn toward her before thinking, how many more people must die before your innocence feels large enough? The line worked. Rin could feel it. Some nobles stiffened against him again. A temple sister near the rear lowered her head. The older generation in the room understood dead officials better than stolen children. Tama knew her audience. Rin did not defend himself to her. That was what she wanted. If he sounded cold, he looked cruel. If he sounded angry, he looked unstable. If he sounded wounded, she would turn pain into obsession. So he faced the hall. When Lord Kanza stole widow payments, the court called it taxation. When Baron held families under charity custody, the temple called it mercy. When Jomoi changed medical records, the palace called it procedure. When Jenda carried my execution order before the exile transfer, the crown called it transport. He lifted the black ledger. I am not asking anyone here to like me. Read what they wrote when they thought you would never see it. The sentence did what anger could not. Nobles did not trust Rin, but they trusted their fear of paperwork. Merchants looked at the copied charity pages and began calculating which ledgers might tie back to their own houses. Palace clerks saw date seals and altered phrasing. Soldiers looked toward Kay for direction instead of Nari. Tama saw that last part. Her eyes moved to Kay. Lord Kay, she said softly, please bring him in before this becomes worse. Kay stood between Rin and the guards Rika lowered but not sheathed. Answer one thing, Kay said to Rin. Rin waited. If I bring you in alive, will you stand trial under a court chosen outside the palace and temple? Nari snapped. There is no such court. Kay did not look at him. Rin answered without drama. Yes. That shifted the hall more than any threat could have. A guilty man could still lie, but a man willing to be judged outside his enemy's room was harder to flatten into the shape Tama needed. Nari laughed once dry and humorless. Young heroes should avoid designing governments while holding swords. Kay's face hardened. Then stop giving me questions swords cannot answer. The first public crack between the new hero and the minister landed in front of too many witnesses. Nari chose force. He lifted his hand, and moon seals carved into the inquiry floor lit red. Sato, still in the balcony, made a low sound of scholarly horror. Those were not ceremonial. The red light spread in a circle around Rin Shizuke Jomei's pillar and the inquiry table. A thin barrier rose from the floor, humming with the same ugly rhythm as Baron's broken purity relic. The demonstone shard wrapped in Sato's cloth began rattling violently. Rin looked down. This trap had been prepared before the inquiry. It was built to turn any resistance into visual proof. If Rin drew the ledger's power, the seal would glow. If Shizu bled, the seal would glow. If Kay crossed the wrong line, the seal would glow. Nari could make the room watch a staged exorcism and call the outcome sacred. Clever work. Too clever to have been made in a hurry. Nari stepped beyond the barrier line. Witnessed the corruption consuming him. Tama lowered her veil. Fear would serve her better than tears now. The red light crawled up Rin's boots. The black ledger opened by itself. Pages whipped in a wind that touched nothing else. Ink poured down from the book to the floor, tracing the barrier instead of attacking it. Black script ran along the red seals, naming each mark, each treated demonstone point. Beneath the floorboards, each temple activation phrase, carved under the inquiry table. The hall watched the trap explain itself. Sato's voice came from above, strained with academic outrage. It is the same band stone. The barrier is built with treated demonstone. Nari's face went still. Kay looked down at the red line around his own boots. You used demonstone in the Royal Inquiry Hall. A temple official shouted for containment. Shazu turned toward the court scribes. Record that answer. 3 scribes wrote before fear stopped their hands. Then, seeing the others had written too, 2 more joined them. Nara's control slipped. Destroy the balcony, the royal guards moved. Yura cut the first rope. 3 incense braziers dropped from the ceiling, spilling thick smoke across the rear of the hall. Renka kicked open the servant panel behind the moon screen. Sato shoved the remaining documents through the balcony gap into the smoke below. The pages scattered badly without grace, and that almost made them better. Perfect evidence looked prepared. This looked like people trying to save what they could before power burned it. Rin reached for Shizu. She looked at his hand. I can walk, she said. I know. Then do not drag me. He let go. That small correction landed between them. He had come to rescue her, but she was not an object pulled from a burning shelf. Rin understood. More importantly, he obeyed quickly enough for her to notice. Shizu took the original prayer hall register from the inquiry table, tucked Yoma's first report inside her robe, and folded the false confession Nari had written for her. For the archive, she said. Rin looked at her. Smoke thickened around the table. Yura appeared through it, blade in one hand, stolen key in the other. Archive later breathing now. Kay stepped into Rin's path again. This time he was facing the guards. You have 1 minute, Kay said. Rin studied him. That will read badly in their report. Kay's mouth tightened. Their reports have issues. From beyond the barrier, Nari shouted Lord Kay. Kay did not turn. Tama spoke next. Kay! Her voice carried less saintess now. It was quieter, sharper, meant for the boy she still expected to own through gratitude. Kay looked at her through the smoke. For a moment, Rin saw the pressure land on him. Old admiration, public expectation, the saintess's beauty, the fear of treason, the desperate wish to still be the clean hero in a room that had become dirty around him. Then Kay lifted Rika and cut the red barrier line nearest the inquiry table. The holy sword rang against hidden demon stone beneath the floor. The red light shattered across the tiles, opening a gap just wide enough for a person to pass. Kay breathed hard through his nose. I am not helping you escape, he said. I am keeping the inquiry from becoming an execution. Rin nodded once. Careful, that kind of distinction gets expensive. Yura pulled Shisu through the gap. Rin followed last, turning just enough to meet Tama's eyes through the thinning smoke. She had stopped crying. Good. He preferred honest faces even when they were ugly underneath. Tama touched the prayer beads at her wrist. Her lips moved without sound. Rin did not need to hear the words. The servant passage behind the moon screen was narrow and mean. It scraped Rin's shoulder, caught Yura's sleeve, and forced Sato to move sideways while clutching documents to his chest. Shitsu moved faster than her archive robes suggested. Renka led them through the incense route toward the outer service stairs, counting turns under her breath. Behind them, the inquiry hall erupted into competing versions of the same disaster. Nari would regain some control. Tama would mourn. Temple officials would shout demon corruption until half the hall repeated it just to feel safer. But the room had seen too much Jomai's oath. The altered report, the Demonstone barrier, K cutting the seal, Shizu refusing the confession. The evidence had entered too many hands to vanish with one command. That did not make them safe. At the bottom of the service stairs, 2 palace guards waited. Renka stopped so hard Sato nearly hit her back. The older guard looked at Rin's black cloak, then at Shizu, then at the smoke rolling down the passage above them. His hand moved toward his sword. Rin stepped forward. The guard did not draw. Instead, he reached under his breastplate and pulled out a folded petition, old enough for the creases to look permanent. My brother served under Captain Iori. The guard said quietly. His pay disappeared after Red Winter. Rin took the paper. The second guard whispered, Haru, are you mad? The older guard opened the side door. Probably move. Yura went first. Shizu followed. Renka and Sato slipped after her. Rin stopped at the doorway long enough to look back. Name? Haru. Copies to the southern shrine and 2 knights leave originals hidden. Haru nodded. The second guard looked like he wanted to arrest everyone but could not figure out which version of treason would age best. Outside the capital was waking into confusion. The palace inquiry had not been open to common crowds, but the outer courtyard was packed with petitioners, servants, minor officials, temple lay workers, vendors, and attendants waiting for news. Sato's backup plan met them there in the form of Black Crow's folded packets, and 3 street boys paid in clean silver to drop papers near people who looked like they could read, and people who looked nosy enough to find someone who could. The first packet landed beside a tea seller. The second slid under the boot of a temple novice. The third struck a merchant clerk in the face. He cursed, unfolded it, and stopped cursing halfway down the page. Within minutes, the courtyard was reading. Not everyone understood the legal language, but they understood names, they understood money. They understood children held in charity wards, they understood a physician paid through the saintess fund. They understood Demonstone hidden inside purity tools because the Red Winter border ban had been announced in every district after contaminated weapons killed too many soldiers. A temple worker tried to burn a packet. An old woman slapped his hand with a ladle. Rat before you burn, she snapped. If it is a lie, the fire will wait. Rin's group crossed the service lane under half cover of smoke and noise. Toki waited near the laundry gate with the wagon face pale reins gripped too tightly. When he saw Shisu, he nearly shouted. Yura pointed at him. He swallowed the shout so visibly that even Shizu noticed. Exit? Rin asked. South Laundry Road is blocked, Toki said quickly. 2 patrols. Fish Market Gate is open because Issei released goats near the tax office. Rin stared at him for 1 beat. Toki looked extremely serious. She said distractions should eat things if possible. Sato climbed into the wagon with his records. I am choosing not to ask where she found goats inside the capital. Healthy decision, Yura said. They moved through the Fish Market Gate while palace horns began sounding behind them. Twice soldiers passed close enough for Rin to hear the shift of armor. Once a temple priest pointed toward the wagon. The tea seller from the courtyard stepped into the road and dropped an entire tray of cups. Porcelain shattered across the stones. He apologized loudly, badly, and in every direction except the one that mattered. The priest slipped. The wagon kept moving. By the time they reached the outer canal road, the capital had split into dozens of private emergencies. Nobles rushed home to lock document rooms. Merchants sent clerks to check donation copies. Templemen tore down Black Dawn pages and found more pasted underneath. Border veterans gathered in alleys with old campaign coins and colder expressions. Servants carried rumors through kitchens faster than criers could correct them. Shisu sat in the wagon with the original prayer hall register on her lap. Rin rode beside the wheel hood low. For a while neither spoke. Then Shizu said, I should have spoken on the stairs. Rin looked ahead. Yes. She accepted it without flinching. I was afraid. Yes. I thought if I lived, I could gather proof. You did. That does not clean the first silence. No. The wagon wheels rattled over canal stones. Toki kept his eyes forward like the reins had become the most fascinating object in the kingdom. Yura gave him one warning glance anyway. Sato pretended to sort papers, though he had been holding the same page upside down for almost a minute. Shisu folded her hands over the register. I am not asking you to forgive me. Good. The answer hurt her. Rin could tell. He did not soften it. Then he reached into his cloak and handed her ices wrapped cloth. Shisu frowned. What is this? Food. I am not hungry. I said, brave people speak better after eating. Shisu looked at the rice cakes and dried meat as if the bundle were more difficult than Nari. She sounds practical. She scares Sato. Most competent people do. Sato looked up. I heard that. Then correct your posture, Shisu said automatically. Sato straightened before realizing he had obeyed. Yura laughed under her breath, tired enough for it to sound almost kind. The wagon rolled south. Behind them, the palace was trying to decide whether the morning had been an inquiry, an attack, an exorcism, or the beginning of a paperwork disease. When Shisu entered Higan Fort, the place stopped feeling like a revenge camp with records and started looking like something that might survive its own ambition. Renka had arrived as a witness people hated. Shisu arrived as proof that the palace could bleed clerks as easily as soldiers. The rescued dependents watched her with curiosity. Former servants recognized the posture of someone who had survived by obeying rules until the rules became weapons. Issei gave her tea before asking anything. Sato gave her a desk before greeting her, which said more about him than he probably intended. Shazu touched the desk. It wobbles. Sato closed his eyes. I know, I can fix it. I have been here longer. That is a duration, not a qualification. Rin left before the argument over furniture turned into Higan's first civil war. The inquiry documents were sorted by afternoon. Shitsu worked beside Sato, and the records room became sharper within an hour. She identified real palace seals, re-stamped wax temple phrasing, altered archive order missing guard rotations, and the specific stroke habit in Naris dictated orders. She did not waste words. She marked corrections in red ink and built a timeline across the wall with string pins and strips of paper. By evening, the frame looked clearer. The replacement hero ceremony had been moved up 2 weeks. Rin's retirement announcement had been delayed until the morning of Tama's private blessing. The West Prayer Hall guard rotation had been changed by Naris' office. The physician's first report had been altered after temple review. The exile decree had been drafted early. The execution command had been prepared before transfer. Tsurumi Hall paid the physician and held Renka's brother. Baron authorized the Demonstone relic alteration. Shiksu stood in front of the wall sleeve's rolled hair, loosening from its pins. We still lack the center. Sato looked exhausted. We have the minister, the physician, the examiner, the escort captain, the charity fund, the false relic, and the altered prayer hall files. That is machinery, Shizu said. Machinery serves intention. Rin stood behind them. Tama. Shizu did not deny it. We cannot prove direct command yet, she said. Baron's oath names her protection, not personal instruction. Renka heard the phrase about you being useful, but the court will call it interpretation. Naris' office connects the purge. Tama remains shielded by implication. Yura leaned in the doorway. So the princess feeds men into the fire and keeps her own hands in her sleeves. Accurate, Shiksu said. Yura glanced at Rin. Your saintess is slippery. She was never mine. The room quieted for a breath. Rin regretted the answer because it exposed more than he intended, not because it was wrong. Shizu noticed. She noticed everything. Before anyone could speak, the scout horn sounded from the outer wall. 2 short calls. 1 long. Visitors. Rin stepped into the courtyard as the gate opened. A crowd waited outside, but it did not move like soldiers or shout like rioters. They came holding folded petitions, broken seals, old pay records missing names, and grief that had learned to stand in line. Farmers from the southern road. 2 merchant clerks with sealed account books. A widow carrying military documents wrapped in cloth. 3 former soldiers. A temple sister from Tsurumi with her moon badge removed. The tea seller from the palace courtyard, still wearing the expression of a man personally offended by distance. Yura looked from the crowd to Rin. Your court has foot traffic. The tea seller stepped forward first. I did not come to kneel, he said. Rin liked him immediately. What did you come for? The man pulled a packet from his robe. My brother disappeared into Moonwell 3 years ago. The temple said he ran. His name is in your papers. Behind him, the widow raised her own records. A former soldier spoke next. Our unit was marked deserter after we died on paper. The temple sister lowered her head. I know where Baron kept novice transfers. The merchant clerk looked like a man who had spent the entire walk imagining his employer killing him in several different ways. My master donated to the saintess fund. He also paid witness preparation fees. I brought copies before he burns the originals. The courtyard filled with voices not as a single roar, but layer by layer names. Dates, lost brothers, stolen pay, false judgments. Small histories the capital had crushed flat until people found a road south. Rin stood beneath the rule boards and understood the cost immediately. Higan had become real. Real places could be found. Real witnesses could be followed. Real families could be punished for asking the wrong person to listen. He turned to Yura. Double road scouts. All approaches? All three. Sato will complain about supply. Sato complains while working. He turned to Issei. Food count? 2 weeks if soldiers stop eating like victory is tomorrow. Several former soldiers looked mildly offended. Issei ignored them with veteran skill. Rin turned to Shisu. Can you build intake records? She looked at the crowd, then at the fort, then at the half-finished records room. Yes, witnesses need numbers. Petitions need categories. False claims need penalties. Anyone bringing proof receives a copy back in case we die. In case? Shisu stared at him. Rin nodded. Reasonable. That night, the Black Dawn Court held its first public hearing outside Higan's gate. The fort could not fit everyone inside, so Rin had torches lit beside the road and a table carried beneath the rule boards. Shisu and Sato sat with records. Issei managed the waiting line. Yura kept armed men far enough back that petitioners could speak and close enough that assassins would regret ambition. Toki carried water, took names from people who could not write, and looked very proud whenever someone trusted him with a document. Rin did not sit on a throne. Higan did not have one, and a throne would have looked ridiculous beside a gate that still leaned in bad weather. He stood beside the table with the black ledger closed in front of him. The first case belonged to the tea seller. The temple sister confirmed the transfer mark. Shizu matched the seal to Tsuruma's lower ward network. Sato found the payment route through a donor house. The black ledger opened only after the human proof lay on the table, as if even the cursed book had learned to respect procedure. The brother was alive. Moonwell Convent Labor Ward marked speech unstable. The tea seller gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. Rin wrote the name on a new board. Moonwell targets. By midnight, the board held 12 names by dawn 28. Higan now had a target list, witnesses, food scouts, copied records, and a public reason to move against Moonwell. The fort had been a hiding place, then it became a warning. Now people were treating it like a court the crown had failed to provide. Kanza's death had frightened officials. Byron's ledgers had embarrassed the temple. The petitioners outside Higan were a deeper problem. They were treating Rin's broken fort like it could hear cases the palace had buried. Minister Nari understood that before sunrise. Reports reached his chamber in a steady stream. Rin escaped the inquiry hall. Shizu Gonjome dead palace barrier. Exposed as Demonstone assisted K interfered with a royal guard. Black Dawn documents circulating in 3 districts. Petitioners moving south, Tsurumi donors requesting private meetings. Border veterans asking about old pay records. Moonwell dependent names appearing on Higan boards. Nari read each report without speaking. Then he ordered the room cleared. Only Tama remained seated behind the screen in his private chamber. The screen had become a useful habit between them. People spoke differently when they could not see her face, and Tama had always enjoyed being a voice others had to imagine. Nari placed the Black Dawn notice on the table. I underestimated him. Tama's voice came softly from behind the screen. You saw a soldier. I saw a wounded soldier. That was my error. He killed my examiner, took my ledgers, stole my witness, and turned my inquiry into a public insult. He also turned K into a liability. Tama's beads clicked once. Nari continued. The new hero cannot lead this response alone. He is beloved. He is thinking. Silence sharpened behind the screen. Nari unfolded a map of the southern road. Rin is still weak in one place. Higan? The fort is ugly but defensible. His weakness is the road that feeds it. Tama stepped out from behind the screen. Without the veil, her face looked less holy and more awake. The villages. Nari nodded. They carry petitions spread. Notices sell supplies, hide witnesses, and repeat his rules. If we attack Higan directly, he becomes a defender again. If the villages burn for aiding demon corruption, he must choose between protecting people and preserving records. Tama looked down at the map. Burning villages damages my image. Only if the first fire is ours? Her smile came slowly. Black Dawn retaliation. Temple criers will say Rin punished villagers who stopped supporting him. Royal troops arrive as rescue noble militias offer grain. K is sent late after the story forms. If Rin moves to save civilians, we strike Higan's records while his fighters scatter. And if he protects the records, then the poor learn what his mercy costs. Tama traced one finger along the road. You are learning him. He taught me in public, Nari said. I prefer not to repeat mistakes where clerks can write them down. Tama picked up one black stone and set it near Moonwell Convent. The dependents? Transfer them north. No. Her voice cooled. Keep them close. Rin wants them. Bait works better when it can breathe. Nari looked at her for a moment. The saintess mask did not hide softness. Rin had been right about that. It hid appetite. Nari bowed his head. As you wish. At Higan Fort, Rin stood before the Moonwell target board as morning broke red over the valley. Shusu had fallen asleep at the records table with a brush still in her hand. Sato was asleep on top of copied petitions and would deny it with legal force later. Yura stood on the wall because scouts did not trust peaceful dawns. Toki slept near the gate beside water buckets, one hand resting on the message satchel as if someone might steal responsibility from him. Rin looked at the names. 28 people held under charity protection, 28 leavers, 28 reasons the court would not let Higan breathe. The black ledger opened on the table beside him. Ink formed across the page. Enemy response purification operation, primary pressure point. Road villages, secondary pressure point, Moonwell dependence. Royal force moving before official decree. Rin read the lines once. The scout horn sounded from the eastern wall. Yura called down her voice sharp enough to cut through the morning. Smoke on the southern road. Rin stepped into the courtyard. Far beyond the valley trees, a dark column rose into the sky, then a second, then a third. The capital had not sent its first blow at Higan's gate. It had started with the villages that dared walk there. The first smoke column rose from the southern road, and Rin Akatsuki knew the capital had stopped trying to win with records. Paper had betrayed them too many times. The trial left contradictions. The relic exposed demon stone. The poisoned cuffs led back to the physician. Even the hidden crossbows inside the inquiry hall only proved the palace was willing to kill its own witness in front of nobles' clerks, and a new hero who still had enough conscience left to hesitate. Nari had learned from that mess a minister like him did not keep losing in the same room, so he chose fire. Fire was cleaner for men who hated signatures. It swallowed witness roots, scattered families, ruined grain, erased footprints, and left priests with ash they could point at while giving the crowd whatever story the court needed by sunset. A burned house did not argue about prayer hall doors. A dead petitioner did not keep copies. Rin stepped into the courtyard as the scout horn sounded again from the eastern wall. 3 columns Yura called down from the broken watch platform Toll Village Cedar Hamlet and the Fishing Shrine Road, too far apart for an accident. Higan Fort woke like a kicked beehive. Petitioners who had slept outside the gate scrambled to their feet, clutching packets and broken seals. Rescued dependents pulled blankets around children and looked toward the smoke as if it might already be climbing the road. Former soldiers reached for weapons. Toki ran from the water buckets with his message satchel hanging open, hair still flattened on one side from sleep. Issei stepped out of the barracks while tying back her sleeves, her face showing the grim patience of a woman who had met disaster often enough to stop wasting surprise on it. Sato came out of the records room with ink on his cheek and panic sitting badly on his shoulders. If we move fighters out, Higan is exposed. Shisu followed with the Black Dawn intake ledger under one arm. She looked calmer than him, but her hand had already tightened around the spine of the book. If we do not move, the villages become evidence against us. Rin looked past the wall again. 3 fires, 3 different targets. The operation had begun before any public decree reached the road. Soldiers moving early meant Nari wanted deniability temple criers would arrive after the damage, ready to explain the flames before witnesses had time to breathe. Yura climbed down from the wall. Orders? Rin turned toward the courtyard. Yura, take scouts to the fishing shrine, pull civilians toward the old canal road. Do not chase raiders beyond the shrine markers. Her mouth tightened. If they are burning houses, save people first. Mark faces where you can. Kill only if they block evacuation. Yura did not like it that was visible in the way her jaw shifted. She would obey because she understood the difference between anger and a job. Rin turned to Issa. Open the lower storehouse food bandages, blankets. Anyone who can carry water carries water. Anyone who cannot carry water watches children. East Gate line? Issei asked. East Gate to the Dry Well Road. Keep refugees off the main road. She was already moving before he finished. Sato Shizu records. Sato stared at him. You know I dislike when you say one word and expect a system. Copy the Moonwell board and split the court records. Shizu understood immediately, walking archive. Rin nodded. Every petitioner leaves Higan with their own case copy and one unrelated case copy. If Higan is raided, the records survive outside the walls. Sato looked as if Rin had suggested feeding children to wolves for legal efficiency. You want to scatter sensitive evidence among farmers during an active fire attack. I want Nari to raid a fort and discover paper has legs. Shizu was already handing bundles to Toki. We prepared duplicate packets after the inquiry. We need wax cord names and runners. Toki. Toki snapped upright. Yes, you can read names? I can read names. Then you match packets to people. If someone cannot carry a copy, assign it to someone who can. If anyone asks why they are carrying a stranger's proof, tell them Higan does not die in one building. Toki looked at Rin. Rin said, this decides whether the court survives if the walls burn. The boy's face changed. Pride would have been too light for that kind of responsibility. He gripped the satchel properly and ran to Shisu. Renka stood near the lower room with Kyo half hidden behind her. Moonwell? Rin remembered the ledger's second warning. Secondary pressure point Moonwell dependence. Nari wants me pulled toward the villages, he said. Moonwell is either moving hostages or waiting for me to panic. Renka's hand tightened around Kyo's shoulder. Rin looked back to Yura. Send one scout north, eyes only. If Moonwell moves, wagons mark direction and avoid contact. Yura gave a low sound of irritation. Smart enemies are bad for morale. They feel the same about us. He tied the broken royal medal under his cloak so it would not flash in the sun. Then he chose 6 riders, 2 former Dawn Guard soldiers, 1 rescued estate guard who had proven steady, a blacksmith brother named Nao, and Haru, the palace guard who had reached Higan near midnight with his brothers, missing pay petition, and 2 copied inquiry pages hidden under his armor. Haru looked like a man riding on the last thread of his body. Rin glanced at him. You can sit this out. My brother's name is on that road. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Rin accepted it. Some men brought strategy to a battlefield. Some brought one dead name and made that enough. Within minutes, Higan split without breaking. That was the first proof the fort had grown beyond Rin's sword. Issei directed the refugee route. Shitsu and Sado tore the records into traveling bundles with a system too fast to explain. Toki moved between them and the petitioners, pressing documents into hands with the seriousness of a boy handling funeral tablets. Yura's scouts vanished toward the fishing shrine. Renka stayed inside the gate, copying Moonwell names onto fresh boards in case the original burned. Rin mounted and took the road toward Cedar Hamlet. The smoke thickened with every ridge. At first, ash drifted lightly over the grass, then came the shouting. Then the smell shifted from distant fire into burning roofs, wet straw, and people running out of time. Cedar Hamlet sat in a shallow dip beside the road, built around an old traveler's shrine and 3 communal grain houses. Rin had passed through it during the Red Winter back then. The villagers had boiled bark with barley and called it stew, because naming misery made it easier to eat. They had given his unit half a sack of millet when they had almost nothing. Rin remembered the headman apologizing because the millet had weevils now the grain houses were burning. Men in black cloaks moved through the smoke with half-sun marks painted badly across their backs. The mark was too large. The stroke direction was wrong. The cloth was too clean near the hem. Rin noticed the boots next matching road leather militia grade, then the bracers. Then the temple rope tucked beneath their sleeves. Fake Black Dawn. One of them dragged a farmer by the collar toward the shrine wall, while another shouted, "This is Black Dawn judgment. The village betrayed Rin Akatsuki." The line was meant for survivors. Rin drew his sword. Alive if possible, he told the riders. At least one needs to speak. Now looked at the burning storehouse and, if possible, becomes inconvenient? Keep a face readable. They hit the hamlet from the smoke side. Rin took the first rider off his horse by cutting the saddle strap and driving him into a water trough. Haru disarmed a militia guard with clean palace technique, the kind taught by someone who once cared about form before politics turned form into decoration. Now smashed a burning door apart with a hammer and pulled 2 children out under his cloak. The former Dawn Guard soldiers moved house to house, dragging people toward the old drainage ditch instead of chasing raiders. Soldiers who survived demon wars knew civilians died fastest when rescue became an afterthought. Rin went for the man shouting. The fake leader wore a black hood and carried an axe too shiny for bandit work. A scroll tube hung at his belt. Orders, prayer script, payment list, whatever it was, Rin wanted it. The man saw Rin through the smoke and shouted louder, "Look, the villain comes to punish traitors." Rin kept walking. That unsettled him more than a charge would have. The man grabbed a village girl by the arm and pressed the axe near her shoulder. She looked 12 at most. Her face had gone blank with the focused terror of a child, trying not to make the wrong sound. Rin stopped. The man smiled beneath his hood. "Drop the sword." Rin looked at the girl. "Close your eyes." The hooded man laughed. "Did you not hear me?" The girl closed her eyes. Rin threw the sword into the dirt. The hooded man's smile widened. Harris dagger struck the axe handle from the side, turning the blade just enough for Rin to step in. Rin caught the man's wrist, broke it against the shrine post, pulled the girl behind him with the same movement, and drove his knee into the man's stomach. The fake leader folded. Rin slammed him face first onto the road and pinned him with one boot between the shoulders. The girl ran to Now. Rin picked up his sword. The other raiders saw the movement and began losing the script they had been given. Some ran. 2 tried to light another roof. Rin killed one before the torch reached the thatch. Haru took the second alive by cutting his belt, so his armor dropped around his knees, then hitting him with the flat of the blade hard enough to end the argument. By the time the smoke thinned, Cedar Hamlet was half burned but alive. People coughed in the road. A woman cried beside a grain house nobody could save. A boy held a chicken under one arm and a temple notice under the other, looking trapped between practical duty and political disaster. The old headman knelt near the shrine while one of Rin's soldiers wrapped a burn on his arm. The villagers did not cheer when they recognized Rin. They stepped back. Rin understood. Yesterday his name had meant rough hope to some of them. This morning, men wearing his mark had set their roofs on fire. Damage like that did not vanish because the true owner of the symbol arrived late. Rin dragged the hooded leader to the shrine steps and tore off his cloak. Under the black cloth was a blue militia sash bearing the mark of House Kuroda, one of the noble houses tied to royal road security and temple transport contracts. The half-sun mark had been painted on separate fabric and stitched over the sash in a hurry. Haru saw the sash and went still. "Gen Kuroda's house," he said. Rin looked at him. "You know them? Royal security inquiry halls, prisoner roads, temple transfers." Haru's jaw tightened. "They also train deniable squads for ministers who prefer clean gloves?" The hooded leader coughed blood into the dirt and tried to laugh. "You think that matters? By noon, temple criers will say Black Dawn burned this village for refusing tribute." Rin crouched beside him. "What is your name?" The man spat near Rin's boot. Rin pressed the black ledger against the man's bleeding palm. The page opened, but the ink did not form a full oath. The man had not signed the main order. Too low to break Nari, useful enough to point upward. The ledger formed one-line field command. Captain Mako Kuroda secondary order leave survivors to speak. Rin looked at the fake cloak, then at the headman. "Did they warn you?" The old man's voice shook. "They came before dawn, said the Black Dawn court demanded grain and sons. We said we had petitions for you. They said petitions were betrayal if we did not pay." He swallowed, then they fired the storehouse. The villagers listened. Fear stayed on their faces, but now it had something to hold. Rin cut the crude half-sun patch from the fake cloak and placed it beside the blue Kuroda sash. Then he pinned the captured leader to the shrine post by the back of his cloak and tied his hands high enough to hold him standing. The image was harsh without turning into gore. The false raider, his disguise exposed evidence beside him. The village he tried to frame gathered in front of him. Rin nailed an evidence board to the shrine post, Kuroda sash, fake half-sun patch temple rope, ledger line naming Captain Mako names of burned houses, injured villagers and the dead as the headman gave them. Above it, Rin wrote, "False Black Dawn Kuroda hand." The leader started cursing. Rin ignored him and turned to the villagers. "I cannot unburn your roofs. Higan has grain tools and carpenters. Anyone who comes will be fed under witness rules. Anyone who stays will receive guards until the next fire." The old headman looked at the Tide Raider. "And him? He lives until every traveler reads the board." The headman stared after that. Rin's voice stayed flat. "Cedar Hamlet decides whether his apology has value." The villagers understood the shape of that answer. Rin had not decided for them. He had given them the proof and the burden that came with it. Fear did not become trust, but it shifted enough for people to start carrying buckets again. A rider came hard from the west before Rin could send the next order, one of Yura's scouts. He slid off the horse with ash across his face. Fishing Shrine Road secured, Yura pulled 30 people to the canal. Raiders wore Black Dawn cloaks over temple guard padding. 2 captured, one had a Kuroda pay chip. Toll Village? The scout's expression tightened. Worse royal troops arrived after the fire and started arresting people for aiding Black Dawn. They are collecting petition copies. Rin turned toward the North Road. There was the real Operation Fire. First, rescue banners. Second, confiscate the records under emergency authority. Nari was not only framing Black Dawn, he was trying to erase the proof Higan had scattered into human hands. Rin looked at Haru. "How many troops does Kuroda send for road control? If they want witnesses, 30. If they want silence, fewer and meaner." Rin mounted Toll Village. Haru glanced at the burning hamlet and cedar. Rin looked at the old headman, the injured villagers, the fake raider tied beneath the evidence board, and now dragging a roof beam away from a trapped goat while looking personally betrayed by livestock. Cedar does what Higan does now. The old headman lifted his head. Rin pointed to the board. "Copy that. Send 1 copy east, 1 south, 1 to Higan. Originals stay hidden, Floorstone's shrine base. Well cover somewhere soldiers will not check first." The headman stared at him. "You want us to keep records? They burned your grain because they thought you had only memory." The old man understood. For the first time that morning, his hand stopped shaking. The ride to the Toll Village felt like racing a blade smoke drag low across the road. Twice Rin passed families moving toward Higan with bundles on their backs and children wrapped in wet cloth. He sent 1 soldier to guide them through the dry well path. Each family moving south became another mouth to feed another record, to protect another reason Nara's next move would hurt. This was what Yura had warned him about. If Rin built only revenge, people would copy his anger. If he built rules, enemies would test those rules with bodies. The Toll Village gates came into view near noon. The fire there had been smaller, more controlled. The attackers burned the storehouse roof and 2 empty sheds enough to make smoke without ruining the tax station. That told Rin the target was paperwork royal soldiers in white and blue road armor had gathered villagers in the square. Temple Crier stood on a cart reading a proclamation that sounded fresh from Nera's desk. By Emergency Purification Authority, the crier announced all Black Dawn documents, petitions, illegal judgments, and corrupted notices must be surrendered any household hiding. Such material will lose burial rights and road protection. A woman shouted, "My son's pay record is not demon corruption." A soldier hit her with the back of his glove. Rin's rider stopped behind the old toll arch. Haru breathed in slowly. Captain Mako. A broad man in blue armor stood near the cart helmet under one arm, watching soldiers search baskets and sleeves. His face carried the lazy calm of someone who had done this often enough to mistake fear for weather. A black cloak hung over one shoulder, the fake half-sun visible inside the fold. Captain Mako Kuroda. Rin dismounted. Haru caught his arm. "If you walk in, they use villagers as cover." Rin looked at the square. "They are already doing that." He walked in. A charge would have told soldiers where to point spears. A single man walking through smoke made them ask what they had missed. The first soldier saw him and shouted. Mako turned. Rin raised one hand holding the fake cloak from Cedar Hamlet. "Captain Kuroda, he called your costume work as poor." The square stilled. Mako looked at the cloak, then at Rin. He did not panic. He smiled a little. "Rin Akatsuki, he said you arrived quickly for a man accused of starting fires. You lit them too close together, that your defense, that your training?" Several villagers looked between them. Soldiers tightened grips. The temple crier stopped reading because the script felt smaller with Rin standing there, holding evidence. Mako stepped down from the cart. "You are under arrest by Emergency Purification Authority. Show the decree." Mako's smile thinned. "Emergency Authority does not require public display during active corruption." "Then it is not law, it is a costume," with a louder voice. One soldier struck an old man who tried to hide a packet under his shirt. The packet fell open. A copied petition slid across the dirt. Rin's eyes moved to it. Mako noticed. "Your little court made them brave," he said. "That is crueler than fear. Fear keeps peasants alive." Rin took one step forward. Mako lifted his hand, and 3 soldiers drew blades near the villagers. "Careful," Mako said. "You kill me, they die. You fight us, they die. You run, we say you burned them and fled. These people will learn very quickly that your protection arrives with consequences." Rin looked at the villagers, at the soldiers, at the cart, at the crier, at the tax station behind them with its record room door open. Then he laughed once, quiet enough that only Haru heard. Mako frowned. Rin looked past him now. The toll bell rang not from the village tower, from inside the tax station. Shisu's plan opened its teeth. Before Rin left Higan, she had scattered more than real records. She also sent decoy packets with marked seals, papers designed to be confiscated, each carrying a false transfer notation that would lead any careful officer to the toll station's emergency collection room. Mako's men had followed procedure beautifully. They seized the packets, logged them, and placed them in the tax office for later transport. Sato had soaked the outer threads in blue archive dust, the kind clerks used to detect tampering on sealed bundles under normal light. The dust vanished under moonlamp oil. It glowed inside the tax station. Toki opened the moonlamp shutter. Blue light poured through the record room window. Every soldier who handled confiscated Black Dawn petitions lit up at the glove sleeves, ledger covers, and coin pouches. The villagers saw it first. Then the soldiers saw each other. Then Mako looked down at his own stained fingers. Rin raised his voice. "Every man glowing blue handled seized civilian petitions before public decree. Every man wearing black beneath royal blue carried false Black Dawn marks. Every confiscated packet was copied before it reached your hands." The temple crier tried to climb off the cart. Haru caught him by the collar. Mako's face hardened. "Kill the boy in the station." 2 soldiers turned toward the tax office. The villagers moved before Rin did. The woman who had been struck threw a bucket into one soldier's legs. A potter swung a kiln paddle into the other man's helmet. The old man who had hidden the petition slammed his walking stick across the tax office door and barred it from outside, forgetting Toki was still inside, until Toki shouted back, "Window exists." Good enough. Rin moved through the opening. The fight in the toll square had to stay controlled. Too many civilians, too many witnesses. Rin cut weapons where he could instead of flesh. Haru disarmed royal soldiers and ordered them to stand down under lawful review, which sounded absurd, and worked on 2 men who clearly wanted a reason to quit. Nao's hammer broke shields apart. The former Dawn Guard soldiers formed a line in front of villagers and pushed the fight away from the crowd. Mako came straight for Rin. He was better than Baron, stronger than Genda. He fought with a soldier's efficiency and a noble officer's confidence, cutting low toward Rin's injured wrist, then high toward the temple brand at his collarbone. Every serious enemy now knew where Rin was hurt. Nari was studying him properly. Rin let Mako press him back toward the cart. You are still fighting like a hero, Mako said between strikes. Rin parried. You are still talking like a man with witnesses. I have orders to leave witnesses to say the wrong thing to say what survives. Mako drove a hard cut toward Rin's shoulder. Rin caught it on the guard, stepped inside, and slammed his forehead into Mako's nose. The captain staggered. Rin hooked the black cloak at Mako's shoulder, tore it free, and drove him backward onto the cart steps. Mako spat blood. You think proof matters to starving people? Rin looked toward the villagers, the blue glowing gloves, the fake cloaks, the stolen petitions scattered across the square. I think people who starve get tired of being told, hunger is holy. Mako lunged again. Rin ended it by cutting the captain's sword, hand across the palm, shallow enough to keep him useful and deep enough for blood. He slammed Mako's hand onto the black ledger the page drank. Mako fought harder than Jomei had, but he was a field commander, not a minister. Men like him were trained to follow sealed orders and survive blame by forgetting which hand delivered them. The ledger did not let him forget. I'm Mako Kuroda, captain. Under House Kuroda, road security carried false Black Dawn cloaks under emergency instruction. I burned storehouses at Cedar Hamlet and Toll Village to create witness claims of Black Dawn retaliation. I seized petitions before public decree. I received verbal command through General Kuroda, acting under Minister Nari Hoshino's authority. The words formed large enough for the nearest villagers to read. Mako stared at them. Rin released his hand. Haru looked at the name Gen Kuroda and closed his eyes briefly. That reaches the palace guard.